The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a canvas of ochre and bone beneath a sky too bright to look at directly. Ryder Kane had been riding for 3 days straight, his horses breathing labored, his own thoughts a tangle of wire and rust. The money in his saddlebag, half now, half when the job was done, felt heavier than it should. Blood money always did. He'd killed 11 men in his 32 years. Each one had earned it, he told himself. Each one had been necessary. The railroad executives who'd hired him for this job hadn't asked questions about his past, and he hadn't volunteered answers. They wanted Elias Boone gone. They wanted his land. They wanted the future to roll right over the past, steel wheels crushing anything stubborn enough to stand in the way. Ryder was the instrument of that future. The Boone homestead appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of weathered buildings surrounded by cultivated fields that had no business existing in this harsh country. Someone had poured sweat and years into making this patch of nowhere bloom. Ryder felt something twist in his chest, something he didn't have a name for. He approached slowly, his hand resting easy near his holster, eyes scanning for threats. The main house was solid timber, built to last, with a wide porch that spoke of evening conversations and coffee watched from rocking chairs. A barn stood to the east, its doors open to reveal equipment maintained with care. Chickens scratched in a pen. A dog barked once, then settled. This wasn't the kind of place you burned down without thinking about it after. Elias Boone emerged from the house before Ryder reached the hitching post. He was a big man, maybe 50, with shoulders that had carried heavy loads and a face weathered by sun and wind into something permanent. His eyes were clear, direct, measuring. "You look like you've been riding hard," Boone said, no preamble. His voice had the slow, certain quality of bedrock. Ryder dismounted, his legs stiff. 3 days. "Your horse needs water. So do you." Boone gestured toward the trough. "Name's Elias Boone. This is my land." "Ryder Kane." The name felt like a confession. "Well, Ryder Kane, I don't know what brings you out here, but hospitality's hospitality. Get your horse settled, then come inside. My wife's got stew on, and there's enough for 3. There it was, the simple, crushing weight of decency. Ryder had expected resistance, maybe hostility, perhaps even recognition of what he was. He hadn't expected kindness. It made everything harder. "I don't want to impose," Ryder said, the words automatic. "You already are, standing there making your horse wait for water." Boone smiled, and it reached his eyes. "Come on, we don't get much company out here. Be nice to hear news from wherever you've been." Ryder tended to his horse, moving through the familiar motions while his mind raced. He could do it now, draw and fire before Boone made it back inside, clean, simple. But his hand didn't move toward his gun. Instead, he found himself checking his horse's hooves, running his hand along her flank, buying time he didn't understand needing. The house interior was modest but comfortable. A woman stood at the stove, younger than Boone by a decade at least, with dark hair pulled back and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. She turned when they entered, and Ryder felt the earth shift beneath his feet. Mara Boone was beautiful in the way frontier sunsets were beautiful. Unexpected, striking, touched with something wild that civilization hadn't quite tamed. Her eyes found his, held for a moment too long, then flickered away. "Mara, this is Ryder Kane," Boone said. "He'll be joining us for supper." "Mr. Kane." Her voice was quiet, controlled. She wiped her hands on her apron and extended one. Ryder took it, felt the calluses, the strength, the warmth. "You're welcome here." "Thank you, ma'am." They ate at a rough-hewn table that had probably been built in this very room. The stew was rich, thick with vegetables from the garden Ryder had seen on his way in. Boone talked easily, asking questions that weren't quite intrusive, sharing stories about the land, the weather, the challenges of making anything grow in soil that didn't want to cooperate. "The railroad's been sniffing around," Boone said, sopping up gravy with bread. "Sent men with papers and smiles, telling me about progress and opportunity, telling me what my land is worth to them." Ryder's hand tightened on his spoon. "What'd you tell them?" "Told them it's not for sale." Boone's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. He simply stated fact. "This land is mine. My father's before me. I built this house with these hands, planted every tree, dug every well. They can lay their tracks around me, but they won't lay them through me. They don't usually take no for an answer, Ryder said carefully. I expect not. Boone met his eyes across the table. I expect they'll send men with guns instead of papers eventually. Men who do what they're told without thinking too hard about why. He paused. You carrying, Mr. Kane? The question hung in the air like gun smoke. I am. Thought so? You've got the look. Boone didn't seem angry, just observant. You running from something or toward something? Neither, just moving. That's a hard way to live. It's the only way I know. Mara had been silent through the meal, but now she spoke. There are other ways. Her eyes were on her plate, but Ryder felt the words like a touch. Better ways. Maybe for some people, Ryder said. After dinner, Boone showed him to the barn. There was a small room in back, clean straw on the floor, a blanket folded on a bench. You're welcome to stay the night, Boone said. Longer if you need work. Can always use an extra hand around here, and you look capable. I appreciate it, but I'll be moving on in the morning. Your choice. Boone extended his hand. Ryder shook it, felt the strength there, the honesty. Sleep well, Mr. Kane, and if you're carrying trouble with you, well, I hope you find a way to set it down before it gets too heavy. Alone in the barn, Ryder sat on the bench and pulled out his gun. A Colt .45, well-maintained, deadly accurate in his hands. He'd killed his first man with this gun, a claim jumper who'd drawn on him outside a saloon in Tombstone. Self-defense, clear as day. The second had been messier, a dispute over cards that had turned bloody. After that, it got easier. After that, it became who he was. He thought about Boone's face, open and trusting, about Mara's hands, strong from work, about the land, stubborn and green against all odds, about the money in his saddlebag and what it was buying. Sleep came hard and left early. The next morning arrived with rooster calls and the smell of coffee drifting from the house. Ryder had planned to saddle up and ride out before dawn, but his body had betrayed him, too exhausted to wake. Now, with sunlight streaming through the barn's gaps, leaving was going to require explanations he didn't want to give. Boone was already working when Ryder emerged, reinforcing a fence line near the northern pasture. He waved when he saw Ryder, gestured him over. Coffee's in the house. Help yourself. Ryder hesitated, then walked to the house. Mara was alone in the kitchen, kneading dough with a steady rhythm. She looked up when he entered, flour dusting her forearms. Morning, she said. Morning, ma'am. There's coffee on the stove, cups in the cabinet. He poured himself a cup, black, and stood awkwardly near the counter. Mara continued working the dough, not looking at him but clearly aware of his presence. You don't have to call me ma'am, she said finally. I'm 26. Makes me feel like somebody's grandmother. What should I call you? Mara works fine. She shaped the dough into a ball, set it in a bowl to rise. You're not what I expected. What'd you expect? Someone harder, colder. She wiped her hands clean, turned to face him. Elias thinks you're running from the law. I think you're running from yourself. We're both wondering which is worse. Ryder sipped his coffee, let the heat of it ground him. Why do you care? Because Elias cares. He sees good in people even when it's buried deep. Sometimes he's right. Sometimes it gets him hurt. Her eyes searched his face. Which one are you, Mr. Kane? The good buried deep or the hurt waiting to happen? I don't know anymore. The honesty surprised them both. Mara's expression softened slightly. Then maybe you should stay long enough to find out. I can't. Can't or won't. Before he could answer, Boone's voice called from outside. Ryder! You know anything about irrigation systems? It was an escape, and Ryder took it. The day unfolded into work. Boone needed help redirecting water from the creek to the south fields, a project that required digging channels and building small dams from stones and packed earth. It was hard, honest labor, the kind that made muscles ache and thoughts go quiet. They worked side by side, Boone talking intermittently about the land, about weather patterns, about his plans for expansion. Going to plant apple trees next spring, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. This soil's stubborn, but it'll support them if you're patient. Everything out here requires patience. How long you been working this place? Ryder asked. 12 years. Came out here after the war, looking for something that made sense. Found this spot and knew it was right. Land speaks to you if you listen. You fight in the war? Did my time. Union side. Saw things I'd rather forget. Did things I'm still making peace with. Boone paused in his work, leaned on his shovel. That's the thing about violence, Ryder. It marks you, changes you, and you either spend the rest of your life trying to undo that change or you let it define you. He looked at Ryder directly. I suspect you know what I'm talking about. Ryder dug his shovel into the earth, said nothing. I'm not judging, Boone continued. Every man's got his past. But at some point, you have to decide if your past is going to be your future too. What if that's all you're good at? The violence? Then you learn to be good at something else. Doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen easy, but it happens if you want it to. They worked until the sun reached its peak, then retreated to the shade of a cottonwood to eat the lunch Mara brought out. Cold chicken, bread, and water from the well. She sat with them, her presence changing the dynamic, making Boone's stories more animated, his laughter more frequent. Ryder watched them together and saw something he'd never had. Partnership, comfort. The ease of two people who'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other through hard times. It should have made him envious. Instead, it made him angry. At himself, at the railroad men, at the entire machinery of greed that had sent him here to destroy this. You're quiet, Mara observed, just tired. He's been digging all morning, Boone said. Man's earned his quiet. But Mara's eyes stayed on Ryder, seeing more than he wanted her to see. That evening, after another meal around the table, Boone pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Not often I have another man to drink with, he said, pouring 3 fingers into 2 glasses. Mara doesn't touch the stuff, claims it makes me philosophical. It does, Mara said, but she was smiling. They drank on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of copper and rose. Boone talked about his plans, his dreams, the future he was building one day at a time. Ryder listened and felt the weight of his gun pressing against his side, a constant reminder of why he was really here. Railroad's going to come harder, Ryder said eventually. They won't just accept no. I know. You ready for that? Boone was quiet for a long moment. I'm ready to defend what's mine. Whether I survive doing it, that's another question. He looked at Ryder. You ever been willing to die for something, Ryder? I've been willing to kill for things. Not sure that's the same. It's not. Dying for something means you believe in it more than you believe in yourself. Killing for something, that just means you're scared. The words hit like a fist. Ryder drank his whiskey, felt it burn all the way down. You could leave, Ryder said. Take the money, start somewhere else. Could? Won't. Boone's voice was firm. This land is mine because I made it mine. I bled for it, sweated for it, poured everything I have into it. If I walk away, what does that make me? What does it say about what a man's word is worth, what his work is worth? He shook his head. No, I stay. Whatever comes, I stay. Inside the house, through the window, Ryder could see Mara moving through lamplight, cleaning up from dinner. Her shadow danced on the walls, graceful and solitary. She's a good woman, Boone said, following his gaze. Stronger than she looks. Came out here knowing it would be hard. Never complained once. I'm a lucky man, Ryder. Luckier than I deserve. Guilt tasted like copper in Ryder's mouth. He spent 3 more days at the homestead. Each morning he told himself he'd leave, and each morning he found reasons to stay. There was always more work. A roof that needed patching, a well that needed clearing, fences that needed mending. Boone never asked him directly to stay, but the work was always there, and Ryder's hands needed something to do besides reaching for his gun. On the 4th night, everything changed. Boone had ridden into town for supplies, a trip that would keep him away overnight. Mara and Ryder were left alone on the homestead, the space between them suddenly vast and charged with something neither would name. They ate dinner in near silence, the scrape of forks on plates too loud. Afterward, Ryder stepped out onto the porch, needing air, needing distance. But Mara followed. You're planning to leave, she said. It wasn't a question. I should have left days ago. But you didn't. Why? Ryder gripped the porch railing, knuckles white. I don't know. Yes, you do. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell lavender and wood smoke. You're not what they sent you here to be. He turned to face her, heart pounding. How do you know what I was sent here to be? Because I'm not stupid, Ryder. Because I see the way you look at this place, at Elias, at me, like you're memorizing something you're about to destroy. Her voice broke slightly. Are you going to kill him? The question hung between them like a blade. I was supposed to. But you haven't. No. Why not? Because he's a good man. Because he doesn't deserve what's coming. Because... He stopped, the words jamming in his throat. Because what? Because I'm tired of being the thing that destroys good things. Mara's hand found his, small and strong. Then don't be that thing. Choose something different. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. She stepped closer, her face tilted up to his. Every moment is a choice, Ryder. Every breath. You can choose to be what they paid you to be, or you can choose to be what you want to be. I don't know what I want to be. Then choose to find out. The kiss happened before either of them decided it would. It was desperate and wrong and inevitable, a collision of loneliness and longing that had been building since the moment their eyes first met. Ryder pulled her closer, and she came willingly, her hands in his hair, her body pressed against his. It was betrayal. It was surrender. It was the moment everything that came before became meaningless, and everything that came after became complicated beyond repair. They stumbled inside, into the darkness of the house, into the bed Mara shared with Boone. Ryder should have stopped. Mara should have stopped. Neither of them did. They crashed together like waves against rocks, all the restraint of the past days shattering into need and heat and breathless urgency. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like another man's life, reality returned with crushing weight. What have we done? Mara whispered. Ryder stared at the ceiling, at shadows cast by moonlight through the window. Something we can't undo. Elias, I know. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I love him. I do. But he's so good, Ryder, so certain of everything. And I'm not. I'm scared and alone out here, and he doesn't see it because he only sees what he wants this place to be, not what it is. You should have told him. How? How do I tell a man who's given me everything that I'm drowning in the life he built for us? She pressed her face against Ryder's shoulder. And now I've made it so much worse. They lay there in the darkness, two people who'd just burned down the world they were standing in, waiting for the flames to reach them. Boone returned the next afternoon, wagon loaded with supplies, his face sunburned and smiling. Successful trip, he announced, climbing down. Got the seeds for spring planting, new tools, even found a few books Mara might like. Ryder helped unload in silence, unable to meet Boone's eyes. Every word the man spoke was a knife twisting deeper. Every kindness was condemnation. Mara emerged from the house, her face carefully composed, her movements measured. She kissed her husband's cheek, asked about his trip, carried packages inside with steady hands. Only Ryder saw the tremor, the careful way she avoided looking at him. That evening felt like a funeral. They sat around the table, eating food that tasted like ash, making conversation that felt like lies. Boone told stories about the people in town, about the shopkeeper's new baby, about the saloon keeper's trouble with a bad whiskey supplier. Normal, mundane things that belonged to a world that no longer existed. You're quiet tonight, Boone observed, looking at Mara. Just tired. Didn't sleep well. And you, Ryder? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. Boone laughed, not understanding, not seeing. Well, whatever ghost you're wrestling with, I hope this place gives you some peace. That's what I built it for, peace. A place where a man can rest. Ryder excused himself early, retreated to the barn, to the small room that had become his temporary refuge. He pulled out his gun, checked the chambers, thought about all the ways this could end. None of them were good. He was packing his saddlebags when Boone appeared in the doorway. Leaving. The big man's voice was neutral. It's time. That's not an answer. Boone stepped inside, closed the door behind him. What's really going on, Ryder? I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. You've been here almost a week. I've watched you. You're skilled with your hands, good with work, smart enough. But you're carrying something heavy, and it's getting heavier. Boone paused. And now my wife won't look at you, and you won't look at me. So I'll ask again. What's going on? The moment stretched. Ryder could lie, should lie. Instead, he found himself saying, I was sent here to kill you. Boone didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, absorbing the words. The railroad, Ryder continued. They hired me to make you go away, permanently. They gave me half the money up front, promised the rest when the job was done. And I couldn't do it. Why not? Because Ryder gestured helplessly. You're decent. You're building something real, and I'm just a man who destroys things. I'm tired of being that. Boone was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was measured. So instead of killing me, you slept with my wife. The words hit like bullets. How did you? I'm not blind, Ryder. I saw the way you looked at each other, saw the way she moves around you now, like you're a hot stove she got burned on. Boone's jaw tightened. I came home yesterday and knew something had changed. I just didn't want to believe it. Elias? Don't. The word was sharp. Don't make it worse by trying to explain. He stepped closer, and despite everything, Ryder's thought had drifted toward his gun. Boone saw the movement, laughed bitterly. You gonna shoot me now? Finish what you were paid for? No. Then what? What happens now? Boone's voice rose, the first crack in his composure. You ride off into the sunset, and I pretend my wife didn't betray me with a hired killer. We all just forget and move on. I don't know. Well, you better figure it out because... The door crashed open. Mara stood there, breathless, her face pale. Ryder's coming. 4 of them, coming fast. Boone's anger shifted instantly to alertness. From which direction? East. They're armed. Boone moved to the window, looked out. Ryder joined him, saw the dust cloud rising in the distance, riders pushing their horses hard. Railroad men? Ryder asked. Or Elias's past catching up, Mara said quietly. He didn't tell you everything, Ryder. There's more to why he won't sell. Mara, Boone's voice held a warning. He deserves to know. We all deserve to know what we're dying for. She looked at her husband. Tell him. Tell him about your brother. Boone's face hardened. My brother died for this land. Killed by railroad-hired guns 6 months ago when he wouldn't sell his piece of the territory. They made it look like an accident, but I know. I've always known. He turned to Ryder. So when they came to me with their offers, I knew what would happen if I said no. I said it anyway. And you didn't think to mention you had a target on your back? I didn't think I'd care about the man they sent to shoot me. Boone's control finally shattered. I didn't think I'd... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter now. They're coming. The riders were closer now, close enough to make out details. 4 men, well armed, riding with purpose. Ryder recognized the type, professionals, not the kind you scared off with warning shots. Get inside, Boone told Mara. Lock the doors, stay away from windows. I'm not hiding in my own house. Mara, no. Her voice was steel. This is my home too. I fight for it too. Boone looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The riders were approaching the property line. They came to a stop 20 yards from the house, spread out in a line. The lead rider was lean and cold-eyed, with a marshal's badge glinting on his chest. But Ryder knew that badge was probably bought or stolen. Railroad companies had a habit of providing their enforcers with official-looking credentials. Elias Boone, the lead rider called out. We need to have a conversation. Boone stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. We've got nothing to talk about. See, that's where you're wrong. We've got quite a bit to talk about. Like how you murdered your brother-in-law last night. The accusation hung in the air like poison. What? Boone's confusion was genuine. What the hell are you talking about? William Travers, found dead this morning in his home, shot twice. Several witnesses saw you arguing with him yesterday in town. Now he's dead, and you're the last person to see him alive. I never. Boone's face went white. This is a setup. That's for a jury to decide. Right now, you need to come with us, peacefully. The fake marshal's hand rested on his gun. Or not. Choice is yours. Ryder stepped out onto the porch beside Boone. This is bullshit, and you know it. The lead rider's eyes flicked to him, narrowed. Who are you? Someone who knows a railroad frame job when he sees one. That's so? The man smiled, cold and knowing. Then maybe you're an accomplice. Maybe you come with us too. Nobody's going anywhere, Boone said. This is my land. You've got no authority here. We've got warrants signed by Judge Morrison himself. Morrison's in the railroad's pocket, Mara called from the doorway. Everyone knows it. Careful, ma'am. Interfering with a lawful arrest is a crime. So is murder, Ryder said quietly. And we all know who really killed Travers. The false marshal's expression hardened. Last chance, Boone. Come peaceful, or we take you by force. Boone raised his rifle. Get off my land! It should have ended in gunfire, but before anyone could draw, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the west. More riders, these ones wearing actual sheriff's badges, led by an older man with gray in his beard and authority in his bearing. Stand down! The real sheriff called out. All of you, hands where I can see them. The railroad men hesitated, caught between following through and creating a massacre with witnesses. The lead rider calculated odds, didn't like them, and slowly raised his hands. Sheriff Morton, he said, voice dripping false courtesy. We're just serving a lawful warrant here. I know what you're doing, Hendricks. And I know you're not a real marshal, just a thug with a purchased badge. Morton rode closer, his deputies fanning out. Mr. Boone, I need you to lower that rifle. Boone complied, but kept his finger near the trigger. William Travers was murdered last night, Morton continued. But it wasn't Boone who did it. We have a witness who saw 4 men matching your descriptions leaving Travers' property around the time of death. So unless you want to explain that, I suggest you ride out of here before I arrest all of you for conspiracy to commit murder. Hendrick's jaw tightened. This isn't over. Yes, it is. At least for today. Morton's hand rested on his own gun. Now, ride! The railroad men exchanged glances, then slowly turned their horses and departed. But the look Hendricks threw back at the homestead promised future violence. After they were gone, Morton dismounted and approached the porch. Mr. Boone, Mrs. Boone. His eyes landed on Ryder. And you are? Just a hired hand, Ryder said. Uh-huh. Morton didn't look convinced. Well, whoever you are, you picked a hell of a place to work. The railroad's not going to stop, Mr. Boone. They want this land, and they'll use every trick in the book to get it. I know. Do you? Because tricks escalate to bullets real quick, and when that happens, my badge won't be enough to protect you. Morton looked at Mara, his expression softening slightly. Ma'am, you might want to consider leaving, at least until this settles. This is my home, she said firmly. I'm not running. Morton sighed. Figured you'd say that. You're both stubborn as rocks. He turned back to Boone. Watch yourself. And if anything happens, anything at all, you send word to town immediately. Understood? Understood. And Sheriff? Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay alive. Morton remounted, tipped his hat to Mara, and led his deputies away. The 3 of them stood in silence after the sheriff left, the adrenaline slowly draining, leaving exhaustion in its wake. They killed Travers just to frame me, Boone said quietly. Murdered an innocent man. He wasn't innocent, Mara said. He sold them mineral rights to land that wasn't his, but he didn't deserve to die for it. Ryder looked at the horizon where the railroad men had disappeared. They'll be back, tonight, tomorrow, next week. They'll keep coming until they get what they want. Then let them come. Boone's voice was tired but unbroken. This is my land. I'll defend it. Even if it kills you? Even then. That night, the 3 of them took turns keeping watch. The homestead that had felt like refuge now felt like a prison. Every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible attack. Ryder sat on the porch during his shift, gun across his lap, and thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. He could leave. Should leave. Walk away from the mess he'd helped create and let these people face whatever came next on their own. But every time he thought about saddling his horse, he saw Mara's face, heard Boone's words about choosing what kind of man to be. Near dawn, Mara joined him on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. "Can't sleep?" Ryder asked. "Can you?" "Haven't really slept since I got here." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning. "I'm sorry," Mara said finally. "For what happened? For—" "Don't." Ryder's voice was rough. "We both made that choice. But I made it knowing what it would cost. You didn't." "I knew enough." Mara pulled the shawl tighter. "Elias is a good man, the best man I've ever known, and I love him, but love isn't always enough to make you happy. Does that make sense? More than it should. He knows about us, not the details, but enough, and he's trying to forgive, trying to move past it, because that's who he is. He forgives." She looked at Ryder. "Can you?" "Forgive what?" "Yourself. For being what you were. For almost being what they paid you to be." Ryder thought about the 11 men he'd killed, about the money in his saddlebag, about the moment on the ridge when his finger had been on the trigger and he hadn't pulled it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Then maybe that's where you start. Not with what you're going to do, but with who you're going to be after you do it." The sun crested the horizon, painting the land in gold and amber. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark began to sing. And for just a moment, despite everything, the world felt like it might contain the possibility of something other than violence. But moments pass, and in the growing light, Ryder saw riders on the horizon again. More this time, at least a dozen, coming from multiple directions. "Mara," he said quietly, "get Elias. They're here." Which the siege had begun. The riders spread out like a noose tightening, surrounding the homestead from 3 directions. Ryder counted 13 men, all armed, all moving with the practiced coordination of soldiers who'd done this before. They stayed just outside rifle range, close enough to be threatening, but far enough to avoid giving Boone an easy shot. Elias emerged from the house carrying his Winchester, his face set in hard lines. Mara followed with a shotgun, her hand steady despite the fear Ryder could see in her eyes. They'd known this was coming. Knowing didn't make it easier. "They're boxing us in," Boone said, scanning the perimeter, cutting off escape routes. "They don't want you to run," Ryder replied. "They want you to fight back so they can claim self-defense when they kill you." "Then what do we do?" "We don't give them what they want." But even as he said it, Ryder knew the truth. The railroad men weren't going to leave empty-handed. They'd come for blood or land, and they wouldn't accept anything less. Hendricks rode forward alone, stopping at the property line. He held up one hand in a mockery of peaceful intent, the other resting casually on his holster. "Mr. Boone," he called out, "let's talk like reasonable men." "We talked yesterday," Boone shouted back. "You tried to arrest me for a murder you committed." "A misunderstanding." "The real sheriff cleared that up, didn't he?" Hendricks smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "But here's the thing. We've got new information. Turns out you've got a wanted man on your property. A killer by the name of Ryder Kane." Ryder felt ice slide down his spine. "We know he's in there," Hendricks continued. "Got a wire from Denver this morning. Seems Mr. Kane's wanted for the murder of a card dealer in Cheyenne. Dead or alive, $500 bounty. Now, you harboring a fugitive, Mr. Boone? Because that makes you an accessory." Boone's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at Ryder. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No? Well, we've got witnesses say a man matching Kane's description has been here for near a week, living in your barn, working your land, eating at your table." Hendricks paused for effect. "Sleeping in your bed, some might say." Mara's sharp intake of breath was barely audible, but Ryder heard it. "You send him out, we'll take him peaceful," Hendricks called. "No harm to you or your wife. You get to keep your land, your life, everything. All it costs is one murderer who doesn't mean nothing to you anyway." The silence stretched. Somewhere overhead, a hawk circled on thermal currents, oblivious to the human drama below. "Well," Hendricks pressed, "what's it gonna be?" Boone raised his voice, steady and clear. "You want him. You come take him, but you set foot on my property, I'll shoot you down like the dog you are." A slow smile spread across Hendricks' face. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." He turned his horse and rode back to his men. "You didn't have to do that," Ryder said quietly. "Yes, I did." Boone finally looked at him. "I may be angry with you, Kane. I may want to put my fist through your face for what you did with my wife, but I'll be damned if I hand any man over to railroad killers pretending to be lawmen. That's not who I am. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Because what good is everything if you sell your soul to keep it?" Mara moved closer to her husband, placed a hand on his arm. For a moment, something passed between them. Forgiveness, or at least the beginning of it. Then the moment broke as gunfire erupted from the tree line. They dove for cover as bullets tore through the air. Wood splintered from the porch railing. Glass shattered in an upstairs window. The chickens in their pen scattered, squawking in panic. "Inside!" Boone shouted. "Move!" They scrambled through the door. Ryder was last, turning to fire 3 quick shots toward the muzzle flashes before ducking inside. The heavy door slammed shut and Boone dropped the bar across it. "Windows!" Mara was already moving, closing shutters that Ryder now realized had been reinforced with iron strapping. Boone had prepared for this, had known it was coming even if he'd hoped it wouldn't. The gunfire intensified, a sustained barrage that peppered the walls and shutters, but the house held. Boone had built well. "They're trying to pin us down," Ryder said, peering through a gun port in one of the shutters. "Keep us from moving while they get into position." "Position for what?" Mara asked. "Fire, most likely. They'll try to burn us out." As if on cue, a flaming arrow arced through the air and thudded into the barn's roof. Then another. Within minutes, smoke was rising from 3 different points. "No," Boone breathed, watching his barn catch fire. "Not the animals." He moved toward his door, but Ryder grabbed his arm. "That's what they want. You go out there, you're dead." "I can't just let them burn. The horses will break free when they smell smoke. They'll survive. You won't." Boone's face twisted in anguish, but he stayed put. They watched through the gun ports as flames consumed the barn, as the horses inside kicked down their stall doors and bolted into the open. The railroad men let them run. They weren't interested in horses. "We can't stay here," Mara said. "If they fire the house is stone foundation and thick timber," Boone replied. "It'll take more than arrows to catch it. They'd need to get close with torches, and I'll shoot any man who tries." But Ryder was thinking ahead, calculating odds and outcomes. "They don't need to burn the house. They just need to wait. We've got food for maybe 3 days, water for less. Eventually, we'll have to come out." "Then we break through before they settle in," Boone said. "We fight our way out. That's suicide. They've got us outnumbered 4-1, and they've got position. So what do you suggest? We surrender?" "I suggest I go out there and end this." Mara turned to him sharply. "What?" "They want me. That's what started this. I go out. Maybe they leave you alone." "You heard Hendricks," Boone said. "This stopped being about you the moment I refused to hand you over. Now it's about making an example. They're going to kill all of us, Kane. Your surrender won't change that." Deep down, Ryder knew he was right. But the guilt was a living thing, clawing at his insides. This was his fault. The money in his saddlebag, the job he'd accepted, the choices that had led him here. All of it traced back to him. The gunfire stopped. In the sudden silence, they could hear the crackle of the burning barn, the nervous movements of the horses that had escaped. Then Hendricks' voice again, amplified somehow. "You've got 1 hour to send Kane out. After that, we start killing your livestock. Every hour after that, we kill something else you care about. Could be your chickens. Could be your horses. Could be that pretty wife of yours when we finally get inside." Mara's face went pale. Boone's hands tightened on his rifle until his knuckles were white. "They're not getting inside," Boone said. "I'll die before I let them touch you." "That's exactly what they're counting on," Ryder said. He moved to the back of the house, peered out a rear window. "How well do you know this land?" "Better than anyone alive. Why?" "That creek you've been irrigating from, where does it run?" "North to south, cuts through a ravine about 200 yards west of here. Runs deep through there, maybe 8 feet in spots." "Deep enough for cover?" Understanding dawned on Boone's face. You want to use it to get behind them. They're expecting us to either hunker down or charge straight out. They're not watching the creek. How do you know? Because I wouldn't watch it either. It's away from the house, away from the obvious escape routes. It's a blind spot. Ryder looked at Mara. How's your shooting? Good enough. Good enough to keep them occupied while we circle around? Wait, Boone interrupted. We're not leaving her here alone. Someone has to keep them thinking we're all pinned down. If they see all three of us make a run for it, they'll follow. Mara squared her shoulders. I can do it. I know which shutters give the best firing positions. I can make them think there's three of us in here. Absolutely not, Boone said. I won't. This isn't your choice, Elias. Her voice was firm. This is my home too. I fight for it too. Remember? The look that passed between them held years of marriage, of partnership, of shared struggle. Finally, Boone nodded. They spent the next 20 minutes preparing. Ryder and Boone gathered weapons and ammunition while Mara positioned herself at multiple firing points, working out a rotation that would make it seem like the house was fully defended. She moved with calm efficiency, and Ryder realized she'd been preparing for this moment long before he'd arrived. This wasn't a woman who waited to be saved. This was a woman who'd learned to save herself. You've got 2 hours at most, Ryder told her. After that, if you're not back, I'll know you're dead, and I'll make my own choices. She checked the shotgun's chamber. Don't waste time worrying about me. Just finish this. Boone pulled her close, kissed her hard. I love you. Whatever happens, I love you. I know. Now go. The cellar door led to a root cellar that Boone had dug during their first year on the land. From there, a narrow tunnel, originally meant for storm shelter, extended 30 yards beyond the house's foundation. It was tight, dark, and smelled of earth and mold, but it was hidden. They crawled through on their bellies, rifles dragging behind them, breathing the close air. Above them, Ryder could hear muffled gunshots as Mara began her deception, firing from different positions to create the illusion of multiple defenders. The tunnel ended in a camouflaged exit behind a cluster of scrub brush. They emerged carefully, checking for sentries. The railroad men were all focused on the house, taking pot shots at the shuttered windows whenever they saw movement. Sloppy, Ryder muttered. They're overconfident. Or they don't care about doing it right, Boone replied. They've got numbers. They can afford to be wasteful. They moved low and fast, using the terrain for cover. The prairie wasn't as flat as it looked from a distance. There were dips and rises, dry washes, and rocky outcroppings. Boone navigated them expertly, never hesitating, always knowing the next piece of cover. The ravine appeared suddenly, a slash in the earth hidden by tall grass until you were nearly on top of it. They slid down the bank into the creek bed. The water was only ankle deep here, running clear and cold over smooth stones. Downstream, Boone said. It curves around their eastern position. They moved through the water, trying to stay quiet despite the natural noise of the current. Every splash seemed too loud. Every displaced stone felt like an alarm bell. But behind them, the sporadic gunfire at the house continued, and no shouts of alarm suggested they'd been spotted. The ravine deepened as they went, the banks rising until they were moving through a natural trench. Sunlight filtered down in patches, creating a surreal landscape of light and shadow. Once, a rattlesnake slithered across their path, and both men froze until it disappeared into a crevice. After 20 minutes, Boone held up a hand. Here, the eastern position should be directly above us. They climbed the ravine wall carefully, using roots and rocks for handholds. Near the top, they bellied down and peered over the edge. 4 men crouched behind a makeshift barricade of stacked stones and fallen timber, about 40 yards from the house. They were focused entirely on the building, taking turns firing and reloading. None of them looked back toward the ravine. Stupid, Boone whispered. They didn't even post a rear guard. They're not soldiers, they're thugs with guns. There's a difference. Works in our favor. Ryder studied the terrain between the ravine and the barricade. There was maybe 15 yards of open ground, then some scattered cover. If they were fast and the timing was right, they could close most of the distance before being seen. I'll take the 2 on the left, he said. You take the right. Wait for my signal. What's the signal? You'll know it when you see it. Ryder pulled himself over the ravine's edge and began crawling forward, using every scrap of cover. A tuft of grass here, a depression in the ground there. His heart hammered, but his breathing stayed controlled. This was what he was good at. This was who he'd been before Elias Boone offered him coffee and called him by name. He was 10 yards away when one of the men turned, perhaps sensing something wrong. His eyes widened as he saw Ryder rising from the grass, gun already drawn. The signal was a gunshot. Ryder's first bullet took the turning man in the chest. His second caught the man beside him before he could bring his rifle around. Behind him, he heard Boone's Winchester crack twice, and the other 2 men fell. It was over in seconds. 4 men dead before they fully understood they were under attack. But the sound carried. Shouts erupted from the other positions. The element of surprise was gone. "Move!" Ryder grabbed a fallen rifle and extra ammunition. Boone did the same, and they sprinted toward the next position before the railroad men could coordinate a response. The northern position was 6 men strong, and they'd heard the shots. They were turning, trying to reorient, when Ryder and Boone hit them from an unexpected angle. More gunfire, more bodies falling. But these men got shots off. A bullet creased Ryder's arm, burning like a brand. Another whipped past Boone's head, close enough to make him duck. They took cover behind a water trough as return fire intensified. Splinters flew as bullets punched through wood. Water leaked from new holes, darkening the ground. "We're pinned," Boone shouted over the noise. "Only for a moment." Ryder reloaded, his fingers working automatically despite the blood running down his arm. "When I say go, you run for that wagon. I'll cover." "That's suicide." "That's the job. Go." Ryder rose from cover and emptied his gun toward the northern position, firing as fast as he could pull the trigger. Bullets filled the air. One of the railroad men screamed and fell. Another ducked back behind cover. Boone ran. Ryder dropped back down, hands shaking as he reloaded. His arm was on fire and he was pretty sure he'd been hit somewhere else too, though adrenaline was keeping him from feeling it yet. He counted in his head, 1, 2, 3, then rose again and fired. Boone made it to the wagon, took position, and started returning fire. Between them, they had the northern group in a crossfire. It didn't last long. 3 more men fell. The remaining 2 broke and ran, abandoning their position and sprinting for their horses in the distance. "Let them go," Boone called. "We've got bigger problems." He was right. Hendricks and the remaining men, Ryder counted 5, had pulled back from the house and were regrouping near the burning barn. They'd realized they were being flanked and were adapting. Mara emerged from the house, shotgun in hand, and sprinted toward Ryder and Boone's position. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet, but she ran zigzag, making herself a harder target. She dove behind the wagon, breathing hard. "Thought you could use an extra gun," she said. "You were supposed to stay inside," Boone said, but there was no anger in it, just fear. "And let you have all the fun?" Not a chance. The 3 of them crouched behind the wagon, catching their breath. Around them, the homestead looked like a war zone. The barn was a skeleton of blackened timber. Bodies lay scattered across the yard. Smoke drifted on the wind, carrying the smell of cordage and death. 5 left, Ryder said, checking his ammunition. Plus Hendricks. They're backed into a corner now. That makes them dangerous. More dangerous than before? Mara asked. Different dangerous. Desperate men make mistakes, but they also stop holding back. As if to prove his point, Hendricks' voice rang out again. Kane, I know you can hear me. This is your last chance. Walk out now, and the Boones live. Stay hidden, and I burn what's left of this place to ash with them inside. He's bluffing, Boone said. He can't. He's not bluffing, Ryder interrupted. Look. One of the railroad men was carrying a can of kerosene toward the house. Another had a torch. No! Mara started to rise, but Ryder pulled her back down. That's what he wants. He wants us emotional, wants us to make a mistake. They're going to burn my home. Not if I can help it. Ryder's mind was racing, calculating angles and odds. How many bullets you got left? 5 in the shotgun, maybe a dozen for the rifle, Boone replied. I've got 8. Ryder looked at the distances, at the positions, at the way the smoke from the barn was drifting. Might be enough. Enough for what? To end this. He checked his gun one more time, then looked at them both. Whatever happens, you two stay here. Don't come out until it's over. Ryder? Mara's hand caught his sleeve. Don't do this. Don't. It's already done. This started because of me. It ends because of me. He met her eyes, then Boone's. I'm sorry for all of it. Before they could stop him, he vaulted over the wagon and ran toward the house. Bullets immediately tracked him, stitching a line in the dirt. He dove, rolled, came up firing. One of the railroad men with the kerosene went down, the can spilling its contents across the ground. Ryder kept moving, zigzagging, making himself as hard to hit as possible while closing the distance. Another railroad man fell, then another, but there were still too many, and they were spreading out, trying to surround him. He made it to the cover of the porch, breathing hard, his wounded arm screaming. Behind him, he heard Boone and Mara firing, trying to keep the railroad men honest. But it wasn't enough. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Hendricks appeared around the corner of the house, gun leveled. End of the road, Kane. Ryder raised his own gun, but he knew he was too slow. Hendricks had the drop on him. This was how it ended then. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a dusty yard in the middle of nowhere, killed by a hired thug for a railroad company that would forget his name before the week was out. The shot came, but not from Hendricks' gun. Elias Boone's bullet took Hendricks in the shoulder, spinning him around. The railroad man's shot went wide, burying itself in the porch post, inches from Ryder's head. Ryder didn't waste the gift. He fired 3 times, center mass, and Hendricks went down hard. The remaining railroad men saw their leader fall and broke. They ran for their horses, abandoning weapons and wounded alike. Within seconds, they were riding hard for the horizon, leaving dust and corpses in their wake. Silence fell like a curtain. Ryder slumped against the porch post, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving pain in its wake. His arm was a mess, and now he could feel the other wounds, a graze along his ribs, something in his thigh that might be serious. Boone and Mara reached him together. Mara was already tearing strips from her dress for bandages, while Boone helped him sit up. "You damn fool," Boone said, but his voice was thick. "You damn stupid fool." Had to be done. You could have died. Probably should have. Ryder looked at the bodies scattered across the yard, at the burning barn, at the homestead that had nearly become a tomb. "This is my fault. All of it." "No," Boone said firmly. "This is the railroad's fault. You just got caught in the middle." He paused. "And then you chose a side. That counts for something." Mara worked on the wounds with quick, efficient movements. The arm was bad, but not critical. The rib graze was superficial, but the thigh wound was deep, and she couldn't tell if it had hit anything vital. "We need to get you to town," she said, "to a real doctor." "Can't. The law—" "The law can go to hell," Boone interrupted. "You saved our lives. That buys you whatever help we can give." They helped him inside the house, laid him on the table where he'd eaten meals, and made conversation about nothing important. Mara brought water and clean cloth while Boone went to check on the horses and see what could be salvaged from the barn. "Thank you," Mara said quietly, cleaning the thigh wound. "For what you did. For not running." "I'm good at running. Thought I'd try something different for once. How's it working out?" He looked down at his bleeding leg. "Still deciding." She smiled despite everything, a small, fragile thing. "For what it's worth, I think you chose right." Even though it nearly got you killed? Especially because of that. Easy choices don't mean anything. It's the hard ones that show who you really are. Outside, Boone was calling for them. They helped Ryder to his feet, foot, and hobbled to the door. The barn was a total loss, collapsed into itself in a heap of smoking timber. But Boone had managed to save some equipment, and miraculously, all the horses had survived. They stood in a nervous cluster near the creek, eyeing the destruction warily. "We can rebuild," Boone said, more to himself than anyone else. "It'll take time, but we can rebuild." "The railroad won't stop," Ryder said. "This was just one group. They'll send more." "Let them. I'm not leaving." Even after all this? Boone looked at his destroyed barn, his damaged house, the bodies that would need burying. Then he looked at the land beyond, the fields he'd planted, the creek he'd channeled, the future he'd imagined into existence through sheer stubbornness. Especially after all this, Every man they send, every threat they make, every match they light, it just proves how much they want what I have. And if they want it that bad, it must be worth keeping. Ryder wanted to argue, wanted to make Boone see sense, but looking at the man's face, he realized there was no argument that would work. Elias Boone had made his choice the same way Ryder had made his, the hard way, the way that meant something. That night, as Mara tended to his wounds and Boone stood watch, Ryder lay in the darkness and thought about choices and consequences. He thought about the 11 men he'd killed before today and the 7 he'd killed during the fight. He thought about the money in his saddlebag that he'd never collected the second half of. He thought about who he'd been when he rode into this place and who he was now that the dust had settled. The answer wasn't clear. Maybe it never would be. But for the first time in years, he was asking the question. That had to count for something. Dawn came with the smell of ash and the sound of vultures circling overhead. Ryder woke to find Mara changing his bandages, her face drawn with exhaustion. She hadn't slept, he realized. Neither had Boone, who sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the horizon for threats that might never come or might arrive any moment. How bad? Ryder asked, nodding toward his thigh. Bad enough. The bleeding stopped, but you need a real doctor. She tied off the fresh bandage with practiced hands. Elias is riding to town at first light. He'll bring back the sheriff and medical help. The sheriff won't help me. I'm wanted, remember? Sheriff Morton's a fair man. He'll listen to what happened here. Fair men don't usually stay fair when railroad money's involved. Mara's hand stilled. Then what do you suggest? We let you bleed out on our kitchen table? I've survived worse. That's not an answer. Before he could respond, Boone appeared in the doorway. We've got company. The word sent ice through Ryder's veins. He tried to sit up, reaching for his gun, but the pain in his leg nearly made him black out. Easy, Boone said. It's just one rider, not railroad men, by the look of him. They watched through the window as a single horseman approached slowly, hands visible and empty. He was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and clothes that had seen better days. He stopped 50 yards from the house and dismounted. Elias Boone, he called out. Name's Marcus Webb. I mean, no harm. Boone cracked the door open, rifle ready. State your business. I've got a message from your brother-in-law's widow. She says you're in danger and you need to hear what I know. Boone and Mara exchanged glances. Sarah sent you, Boone shouted back. Yes, sir. Can I approach? I'm unarmed. After a tense moment, Boone nodded. The old man walked forward carefully, his hands still visible. Up close, Ryder could see the lines of hard living etched deep in his face, but his eyes were clear and honest. Thank you for seeing me, Webb said, removing his hat. Mrs. Travers is beside herself with worry. She knows her husband's death wasn't your doing, Mr. Boone. She knows it was the railroad's way of framing you. How does she know that? Mara asked. Because I was there. I saw the 4 men who did it. Webb's voice dropped. I was William's ranch hand, been working for him near on 5 years. The night he died, I was in the barn tending a sick horse. I heard riders come in fast, heard shouting, then shots. By the time I got to the house, William was dead and those men were planting evidence. One of them saw me, chased me into the brush. I've been hiding ever since, but Sarah found me yesterday. She said you folks needed to know the truth. The truth won't bring William back, Boone said quietly. No, sir, it won't. But it might keep you alive. Those railroad men are telling everyone in town you're a murderer. They're turning people against you, making sure nobody will help when they come back to finish what they started. Let them come, Boone said. We beat them once. You beat one group, Webb corrected. But the railroad's got deep pockets and no shortage of hired guns. They'll keep sending men until you're dead or gone, and they won't care how many bodies it takes. Ryder watched the old man's face, looking for signs of deception. He found none. Webb was telling the truth, which made it all the harder to hear. What does Sarah want? Mara asked. She wants me to testify, go on record about what I saw. She thinks if the real story gets out, it might shame the railroad into backing off. They don't shame easy, Ryder said from the table. Webb turned to look at him for the first time, taking in the bandages and the blood-stained clothing. You'd be Kane then, the gunman. That's right. Sarah mentioned you might be here, said the railroad's spreading stories about you too. Wanted killer, they claim. Dangerous outlaw. Webb paused. That true? Parts of it? Which parts? The dangerous part. Webb nodded slowly. Well, dangerous or not, you picked the right side of this fight. That counts for something. Does it? Ryder asked. Because from where I'm sitting, picking sides just got a lot of people killed. People were always going to die over this land, Webb said. Question is whether it's going to be good people or bad people. Seems to me you helped tip the scales toward the right answer. Boone interrupted before Ryder could respond. You willing to testify, Mr. Webb? Even knowing it'll put a target on your back? Already got a target on my back. Might as well use it to do some good. Webb shifted his weight. But I need help getting to the county seat. The railroad's got men watching the roads, and I'm not much of a fighter anymore. I'll take you, Boone said. Elias, no, Mara protested. You leave here, they'll what? Burn down what's left. They already tried that. Boone's jaw was set. If Webb's testimony can expose what the railroad's doing, it might be the only way to end this without more bloodshed. Or it might just get you both killed before you reach the county seat. That's a risk I have to take. Ryder struggled to his feet, gritting his teeth against the pain. Then I'm coming with you. You can barely walk, Mara said. I can ride, and I can shoot. That's all that matters. You need rest, not a 3-day journey across hostile territory. What I need is to finish what I started. Ryder met Boone's eyes. You saved my life yesterday. Let me help save yours. Boone studied him for a long moment. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Mara packed supplies while Boone selected horses and checked weapons. Webb helped where he could, his old hand still capable despite the arthritis Ryder noticed in his knuckles. Ryder sat on the porch, cleaning and loading guns with mechanical precision. Each movement sent pain lancing through his wounds, but he welcomed it. Pain meant he was alive. Pain meant he still had a chance to make things right. Mara brought him coffee and sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. He'll forgive you eventually, she said finally, for what happened between us. That's who he is. Will you forgive yourself? The question seemed to surprise her. I don't know. Does it matter? It's the only thing that matters. She was quiet, watching the horizon where the burned barn still smoldered. I married Elias because he was good and stable and everything my father wasn't. I thought that would be enough. I thought I could build a life on gratitude and respect. But you can't. No, you can't. She turned to look at him. When you kissed me, it wasn't about wanting you instead of him. It was about wanting to feel alive. Wanting to feel like I still had choices, like I wasn't just another piece of this homestead he built. She paused. Does that make sense? More than it should. I do love him, Ryder. I love him more than I can say. But sometimes love isn't enough to keep you from drowning. Then you have to learn to swim. Is that what you're doing? Learning to swim? Ryder thought about the money in his saddlebag, about the job he'd failed to complete, about the man he'd been when he rode into this place. I'm trying to remember how. Been sinking so long I forgot it was an option. Mara placed her hand over his, just for a moment. For what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you know. They left at noon, 3 riders heading west toward the county seat. The journey would take 3 days if they pushed hard, longer if they had to avoid main roads. Mara stood on the porch as they departed, shotgun in hand, her face a mask of worry and determination. Keep the doors locked, Boone called back. Don't open for anyone but us or the sheriff. I know how to take care of myself. I know you do. Just be careful. You too. The homestead disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance and dust. Ryder turned forward and didn't look back. They rode in silence for the first hour, each man lost in his own thoughts. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and desolate in equal measure. Overhead, clouds gathered in dark formations that promised rain but probably wouldn't deliver. Webb broke the silence first. How's the leg holding up? It's holding. That's not what I asked. It's the only answer you're getting. The old man chuckled. Fair enough. Just don't fall off your horse. I'm too old to be lifting grown men. As the afternoon wore on, the terrain changed. They left the open prairie and entered broken country, where rocky outcroppings and twisted juniper trees created a landscape of shadows and hidden spaces. Good country for ambushes. Boone raised his hand, signaling a stop. Someone's following us. Ryder had felt it too, that prickle on the back of his neck that came from years of being hunted and hunting others. How many? Can't tell. At least 2, maybe more. Staying back, but they're there. Railroad men? Who else would it be? They pressed on, but now every rock formation looked like cover. Every distant bird could be a signal. The tension wound tighter with each mile. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they came upon a small settlement, barely more than a trading post and a few scattered buildings, a place for travelers to rest and resupply before continuing west. We should stop here for the night, Webb suggested. The horses need rest, and we could use proper food. Could also be a trap, Ryder said. Could be, but we're sitting ducks out in the open. At least here we've got walls and other people around. Boone considered, then nodded. We stop, but we take shifts watching. Nobody sleeps alone. The trading post was run by a grizzled woman named Cassidy, who asked no questions and expected no explanations. She rented them 2 rooms upstairs and served them stew that was heavy on vegetables and light on meat. You boys look like you've been through hell, she observed, pouring coffee. Close enough, Boone replied. Railroad trouble? The question was casual, but her eyes were sharp. Boone hesitated, then decided on honesty. How'd you know? Because everyone who comes through here lately has railroad trouble. They're pushing west hard, buying up land, running people off. Folks who resist tend to disappear or die in convenient accidents. She refilled Webb's cup. You resisting? Trying to. Cassidy nodded approvingly. Good. Somebody needs to. Those bastards think they own the whole frontier. She leaned closer, voice dropping. Word of advice, though. They've got men in every town between here and the county seat. You're planning to testify or make trouble, you best watch your backs. Appreciate the warning, Ryder said. After dinner, they retired to the rooms. Ryder took first watch, positioning himself by the window where he could see the street below. Boone and Webb shared the other room, both of them asleep within minutes. The night deepened. Ryder's leg throbbed with every heartbeat, but he stayed alert, scanning the darkness for movement. Around midnight, he saw them, 2 figures moving between buildings, trying to stay hidden. They were scouting, checking defenses, planning their approach. He woke Boone silently, gestured toward the window. Boone saw the movement and understood immediately. How many? He whispered. 2 that I can see. Probably more we can't. What do we do? We leave. Now. Before they're ready. They woke Webb and gathered their gear with quiet efficiency. Cassidy appeared as they descended the stairs, unsurprised. Back doors through the kitchen, she said. Your horses are already saddled. Figured you might need a quick exit. Thank you, Boone said. Don't thank me. Just don't die. I hate it when customers die before they settle their accounts. They slipped out into the night, found their horses where Cassidy had promised. As they rode out of the settlement, Ryder heard shouting behind them. The scouts had realized their quarry was escaping. They'll follow, Webb said. Let them, Ryder replied. Better they chase us than find us sleeping. They rode hard through the darkness, pushing the horses as much as they dared on uncertain ground. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. More riders than Ryder had estimated. At least 6, maybe 8. There, Boone pointed toward a formation of rocks ahead. We can make a stand there. They reached the rocks and dismounted, taking positions among the boulders. The pursuing riders were close now, close enough to hear their horses breathing, close enough to see the muzzle flashes when the shooting started. Ryder fired methodically, each shot calculated and precise. One rider fell. Then another. But there were too many, and they were spreading out, trying to flank the position. We can't hold this, Webb shouted. We don't have to hold it, Ryder shouted back. We just have to make them think twice about pressing. He was right. The railroad men had expected an easy target, not a fortified position defended by men who knew how to shoot. After losing 3 of their number, they pulled back to reassess. In the brief lull, Boone grabbed Ryder's shoulder. We need to move. They'll come back with a better plan. They mounted and rode again, this time angling north away from the main trail. The terrain grew rougher, more difficult for horses, but it also provided more cover. The pursuit continued, but at a distance now, the railroad men more cautious after their losses. As dawn broke, they found themselves in a narrow canyon with walls that rose 40 feet on either side. It was a gamble. If they got trapped inside, they'd have nowhere to run. But it was also a natural choke point that would force their pursuers to come at them in small numbers. "How's your ammunition?" Ryder asked. Boone checked. "Maybe 20 rounds. You?" "About the same." "Webb?" The old man looked sheepish. "I told you I wasn't much of a fighter. I've got 6 bullets and haven't hit anything yet." "Then you better make those 6 count." They positioned themselves at a bend in the canyon where the walls narrowed to barely 10 feet across. Anyone coming through would have to pass single file, exposed and vulnerable. The wait was agonizing. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun climbed higher, turning the canyon into an oven. Ryder's wounded leg had gone from painful to numb, which worried him more than the pain had. Then they came. The railroad men tried to rush through, 4 abreast, betting on speed and numbers. But the canyon walls forced them into a cluster, and Ryder and Boone opened fire from elevated positions. The canyon became a killing box. Men fell. Horses screamed and reared. The survivors retreated in chaos, leaving their dead behind. "How many more?" Webb asked, his voice shaking. "Not enough to keep trying," Boone said. "We bloodied them good. They'll go back for reinforcements." "Which gives us maybe half a day's lead," Ryder calculated. "We need to use it." They rode out of the canyon and back toward the main trail, gambling that the railroad men would expect them to keep running north. Instead, they turned west again, back toward the county seat and the testimony that might end this. The second day passed in a blur of exhaustion and constant vigilance. They saw riders in the distance several times, but managed to avoid direct contact. Ryder's condition deteriorated. Fever had set in, and the wound in his thigh was showing signs of infection despite Mara's careful bandaging. "You need rest," Boone said when they stopped to water the horses. "I'll rest when we reach the county seat." "You'll be dead before we reach the county seat if you don't take care of yourself." "Then I'll be dead. Won't be the first time I cheated it. Probably won't be the last." But that night, when they made camp in a dry wash hidden from the trail, Ryder's body betrayed him. The fever spiked, and he slipped into delirium. He was vaguely aware of Boone and Webb working on his leg, of the pain as they cleaned the wound and applied fresh bandages, of water being forced between his lips. In his fever dreams, he saw faces. The 11 men he'd killed before coming to Boone's homestead, each one looking at him with accusation or pity or understanding. He saw his father, dead 20 years, asking why his son had chosen violence over everything else. He saw Mara, her hand extended, offering salvation or damnation, or perhaps just human connection. And he saw himself, young and uncertain, before he'd picked up his first gun and discovered he was good at killing. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now, someone he might have been in another life, in another world where choices mattered differently. When the fever broke near dawn, he woke to find Boone sitting beside him, rifle across his knees, watching the eastern horizon turn from black to gray to gold. "Welcome back," Boone said quietly. "How long was I out?" "Most of the night. You gave us a scare." Ryder sat up slowly, testing his body's limits. The fever had passed, but he felt wrung out, hollow. "We lost time. We're still a day from the county seat. We'll make it." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it. Sometimes that's enough." Webb was already up, brewing coffee over a small fire. He handed Ryder a cup, and the simple kindness of it, hot coffee on a cold morning, felt like more than Ryder deserved. "Thank you, Pith," he said. "Both of you, for not leaving me behind." "We don't leave people behind," Boone replied, "not even people who've wronged us." The words hung between them, an acknowledgement of what had happened with Mara, of the betrayal that neither of them had really addressed. "I'm sorry," Ryder said, "for what I did, for what it cost you." Boone was quiet for a long time. "I know you are, and I appreciate the apology, but sorry doesn't undo it, Kane. It doesn't change what happened." "I know. But here's the thing I've realized. Holding on to anger takes energy I don't have to spare. The railroad's trying to destroy everything I've built. My wife made a mistake in a moment of loneliness and fear. You made a mistake in a moment of whatever it was. And we're all here now, trying to survive long enough to make it matter. He looked at Ryder directly. So I'm choosing to let it go. Not forget it. Not pretend it didn't happen. But let it go so it doesn't poison everything else. That's more grace than I deserve. Probably. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about choosing something better than the cycle of hurt and revenge. Boone stood, stretched. Now, drink your coffee. We've got ground to cover. They rode through the third day with renewed purpose. The county seat appeared on the horizon around noon, a proper town with wooden sidewalks and two-story buildings and a courthouse with a clock tower. Civilization, or at least the frontier's version of it. But as they approached, Ryder noticed something wrong. The streets were too quiet. People moved with hurried purpose, not meeting each other's eyes. And there were men, hard men with guns, positioned at strategic points throughout the town. This doesn't feel right, Webb muttered. It's not, Ryder agreed. They're here. They're waiting for us. How many? Boone asked. Ryder counted the obvious ones, then estimated the hidden ones. At least a dozen, maybe more. We came all this way. We can't turn back now. We don't turn back, but we don't ride in blind either. Ryder studied the town layout, looking for advantages. The courthouse is at the center of town. That's where Webb needs to be. But between here and there, it's a gauntlet. So how do we run it? We don't run. We walk. Slow and steady, like we've got every right to be here. Ryder checked his guns. And we make them decide if they want this fight in the middle of town where everyone can see them for what they are. They rode in three abreast, making no attempt to hide. Eyes tracked them from windows and doorways. The railroad men shifted position, hands moving toward weapons. They made it halfway to the courthouse before a man stepped into the street ahead of them. He was tall and gaunt, with a face like a skull, and eyes that had seen too much death to fear it anymore. That's far enough, he said. His voice carried authority and violence in equal measure. They stopped. Ryder's hand rested easy near his gun, not threatening, but ready. We've got business at the courthouse, Boone said. No, you don't. You've got business turning around and riding back where you came from. We've got a right to be here. This is a free town. The gaunt man smiled, showing teeth that had gone bad years ago. Nothing's free, Mr. Boone. Not in this town, not on this frontier, not in this life. Everything costs something. Question is whether you're willing to pay. We're willing, Ryder said. The gaunt man's eyes shifted to him, calculating. You'd be Kane. Heard you were dead. Heard wrong. Seems I did. That's a problem. The man's hand moved fractionally closer to his gun. See, my employers paid good money for you to be dead. They don't like it when they don't get what they paid for. Then they should hire better help. The insult landed. The gaunt man's face tightened and the street went silent. This was the moment, Ryder knew. The fulcrum point where everything could tip toward violence or pull back from the edge. Then a door opened and Sheriff Morton stepped out of the courthouse. Stand down, Graves, he called out. This is still my town, and the law still means something here. The gaunt man, Graves, didn't move. The law's whatever the railroad says it is, Sheriff. You know that as well as I do. Maybe, but not today. Not while I'm wearing this badge. Morton walked forward, deliberately placing himself between the railroad men and Ryder's group. These men have a right to enter the courthouse. You want to dispute that, you can take it up with Judge Harrison. Harrison's in the railroad's pocket. Then it shouldn't matter if they testify, should it? Morton's logic was simple and unassailable. Let them have their say. If the railroad's got nothing to hide, they've got nothing to fear. Graves looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to draw and settle this with bullets. But too many citizens had emerged from buildings, watching. Too many witnesses who would remember if he gunned down the sheriff and 3 unarmed men in broad daylight. This isn't over, Graves said finally. It never is, Morton replied. Now step aside. Slowly, reluctantly, the railroad men moved back. Ryder, Boone, and Webb dismounted and walked toward the courthouse, Morton escorting them. The crowd parted, creating a corridor of tense silence. Inside the courthouse, the air was cooler but no less charged with tension. A clerk led them to a waiting room where they sat on hard wooden benches, listening to the clock tower mark the passage of time. "Thank you," Boone said to Morton, "for what you did out there." "Don't thank me yet. Getting you inside was the easy part. Getting you out alive might be harder." Morton leaned against the wall. "Judge Harrison is scheduled to hear testimony in an hour. But he's been putting pressure on me to arrest you for Travers' murder. The railroad's leaning on him hard." "Then Mr. Webb's testimony is even more important," Boone said. "Maybe. Or maybe it just gets all of you killed for nothing." Morton looked at Webb. "You sure about this, old-timer? You can still walk away." Webb straightened his spine. "I'm sure. William Travers was a good man, even if he made mistakes. He deserves the truth to be told. And these folks deserve justice." "Justice is in short supply these days. Then we make our own." The hour passed slowly. Ryder cleaned his guns to give his hands something to do. Boone paced. Webb sat motionless, eyes closed, perhaps praying, or perhaps just gathering strength. Finally, a bailiff appeared. "Judge Harrison is ready to hear testimony." They followed him into the courtroom, a high-ceilinged space with windows that let in dusty shafts of sunlight. Judge Harrison sat behind his bench, a portly man with mutton chops and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The railroad's lawyer was already present, a slick man in an expensive suit who smiled with predatory confidence. And in the gallery, Ryder counted at least 6 railroad men, including Graves. This wasn't a trial, it was a trap waiting to spring. But they'd come too far to turn back now. Webb took the stand, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then he began to speak. Webb's voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands. He recounted the night of Travers' murder in careful detail. The riders arriving in darkness, the sound of breaking glass, the gunshots that shattered the prairie silence. He described hiding in the barn, watching through gaps in the planking as 4 men emerged from the house and methodically arranged the scene to implicate Boone. "Can you identify any of these men?" Judge Harrison asked, his tone suggesting he already regretted allowing this testimony. "Yes, sir. 3 of them are dead now, killed in the fight at the Boone homestead. But the 4th one is sitting right there in your courtroom." Webb pointed directly at Graves. "That man, he was giving the orders." The courtroom erupted. Graves half rose from his seat, hand moving toward his gun before Sheriff Morton stepped forward, his own weapon drawn. "Sit down, Graves," Morton commanded. "You draw in my courtroom, I'll drop you where you stand." Graves settled back slowly, but his eyes promised murder. The railroad lawyer stood, smoothing his suit with practiced calm. "Your Honor, this is clearly the testimony of a confused old man seeking attention. Mr. Graves is a respected security consultant for the railroad, not a murderer. And I have here sworn affidavits from 3 witnesses who place Mr. Boone in the vicinity of the Travers residence on the night in question." "Bought witnesses?" Boone said from the gallery. "Men who'll say whatever you pay them to say." "Order!" Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Mr. Boone, you will remain silent or I'll have you removed." "On what grounds?" Ryder stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "He's not on trial here. Or is he? Because if this is a trial, he deserves representation and a proper defense." Harrison's face reddened. "This is a hearing, not a trial. I'm simply gathering testimony to determine if charges should be filed." "Then let us testify," Ryder pressed. "Let us tell what happened at the homestead, how the railroad sent hired killers to murder Boone and take his land, how they framed him for Travers' death to justify it. Those are serious accusations requiring evidence. We've got 13 bodies buried on Boone's property. That evidence enough?" The courtroom went silent. Even the railroad lawyer seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Harrison cleared his throat. "The court will take a brief recess while I consider how to proceed." He stood, his robes rustling. "Everyone remain in the courtroom. No one leaves." As the judge retreated to his chambers, the tension in the room coiled tighter. Graves and his men shifted position, subtly surrounding the exits. Morton stayed close to Ryder and Boone, his hand never leaving his gun. "This is bad," Morton muttered. "Harrison's stalling. He's waiting for instructions from the railroad on how to handle this." "What happens when he gets those instructions?" Boone asked. "Nothing good. My guess is he'll rule your testimony inadmissible and order your arrest. Then it's my job to put you in a cell where Graves and his boys can get to you quietly." "You gonna do it?" Morton's jaw tightened. "I took an oath to uphold the law. Problem is, I'm not sure what the law is anymore when money can buy judges and truth doesn't matter." "Then maybe it's time to decide what you believe in more," Ryder said quietly. "The law or justice?" Before Morton could answer, the chamber doors burst open. But it wasn't the judge who emerged. It was a woman in a traveling cloak, her face flushed from hard riding. Behind her came two more men, both carrying leather satchels that marked them as lawyers from somewhere more civilized than this frontier town. "Sarah Travers," Boone breathed, "William's widow." Sarah Travers swept into the courtroom with the bearing of someone who'd run out of fear and found fury instead. She was younger than Ryder expected, maybe 30, with steel in her eyes that spoke of recent grief hardened into purpose. "Where is Judge Harrison?" she demanded. "In chambers," the bailiff stammered. "Ma'am, you can't just "I can and I will." She turned to the two lawyers. "Gentlemen, if you please." One of the lawyers stepped forward, producing a sheaf of documents. "My name is Robert Chen, attorney at law from San Francisco. I represent Mrs. Sarah Travers and, as of this morning, Mr. Elias Boone. I have here a writ of habeas corpus preventing any arrest of Mr. Boone without proper grand jury indictment, as well as affidavits from 4 citizens of this county attesting to his good character and the railroad's pattern of intimidation." The railroad lawyer's confident smile faltered. "Your Honor isn't even present. This is highly irregular." "What's irregular is attempting to railroad an innocent man through a kangaroo court," Chen replied smoothly. "Pun intended. Mutz." Harrison emerged from his chambers, looking flustered. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" "The meaning, Your Honor, is that the rule of law still exists in this territory, even if certain parties would prefer otherwise." Chen handed the documents to the bailiff. "I'm formally entering an appearance on behalf of Mr. Boone and requesting this hearing be postponed until proper discovery can be completed and all witnesses properly deposed." "This is outrageous," the railroad lawyer sputtered. "We have witnesses ready to testify right now." "You have purchased testimony from disreputable sources," Sarah Travers said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "I have evidence, real evidence, of the railroad's criminal conspiracy. Letters my husband kept documenting bribes, threats, and illegal land seizures. Correspondence between railroad executives discussing which obstacles needed to be removed." She pulled a leather portfolio from her cloak. He was gathering proof before they killed him. He knew this day would come. The railroad lawyer's face went pale. Graves stood slowly, his hand drifting toward his gun again. "Don't even think about it," Morton said, his revolver now openly drawn. "You so much as twitch wrong, and I'll paint these walls with you." "Everybody calm down," Harrison said, though his voice lacked authority. He looked at the documents Chen had presented, then at Sarah's portfolio, then at the crowd of citizens who had gathered in the courtroom, all of them watching to see if justice would be served or sold. For a long moment, the judge seemed to wrestle with himself. Duty versus self-preservation, integrity versus pragmatism. Ryder watched the calculation happen behind his eyes and knew what was coming before Harrison spoke. "This hearing is postponed," Harrison announced finally, "pending full review of all evidence and testimony. Mr. Boone, you are released on your own recognizance. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell, but the sound was lost in the chaos that erupted. The railroad men surged forward, but Morton and his deputies formed a wall between them and the defendants. Citizens who'd been silent observers suddenly found their voices, shouting questions and accusations at the railroad lawyer. In the confusion, Sarah Travers reached Boone. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what happened to William, for not speaking up sooner. I was scared, but fear is no excuse." "You're speaking up now," Boone replied. "That's what matters." "Those documents she has," Ryder said to Chen, "they enough to bring down the railroad's operation here?" "If they're authentic, yes. They implicate not just local agents, but executives in San Francisco. This could become a federal case." Chen adjusted his spectacles. "Of course, that assumes we all live long enough to see it through." Cheerful thought. "I'm a realist, Mr. Kane. The railroad has too much invested here to walk away quietly. They'll fight, and they won't fight fair." As if to prove his point, Graves appeared at the courtroom door, blocking their exit. His men flanked him, hands on weapons. "You think this changes anything?" Graves said. "Some fancy lawyer and a widow with papers? The railroad owns this territory, owns the judges, the law, the future. You're just obstacles waiting to be cleared." "Then clear us," Ryder challenged, stepping forward despite the pain in his leg. "Right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses. Show everyone what the railroad really is." Graves's hand hovered over his gun. The moment stretched taut as wire, but Morton moved between them, badge gleaming. "This ends now, Graves. You want to shoot someone? You go through me first. And you know what happens then. Every lawman in the territory comes looking for you. The railroad can't buy them all." "Can't we?" Graves smiled coldly. "You'd be surprised what money can buy, Sheriff. Maybe even you. Try me and find out." For another heartbeat, violence hung in the air like a physical presence. Then Graves stepped aside, gesturing mockingly. "Go on then. Run while you can. But this territory isn't big enough to hide you. We'll find you. And when we do, there won't be any lawyers or sheriffs to save you." They filed past him, every muscle tensed for the shot that didn't come. Outside, the street was full of people watching, waiting to see if blood would flow on the courthouse steps. "We need to get out of town," Morton said. "Now, before they regroup." "Where do we go?" Boone asked. "Sarah has a ranch north of here," Chen said. "Defensible position, and she's got men loyal to her late husband. It's the safest place until we can arrange federal protection." They mounted quickly, forming a tight group around Sarah and the lawyers. As they rode out of town, Ryder looked back and saw Graves standing in the street, watching them leave. The message in his eyes was clear. This wasn't over. The ride to Sarah's ranch took 3 hours through country that grew increasingly rugged. They saw riders in the distance several times, shadowing them but not attacking. Waiting for the right moment, Ryder knew. Waiting for them to let their guard down. The ranch house appeared as the sun began its descent, a sturdy structure built of stone and timber, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. A dozen men stood watch, armed and alert. They relaxed visibly when they recognized Sarah. "These are good men," she explained as they dismounted. "They worked for my husband, and they know what the railroad did to him. They'll fight to protect what he built." Inside, Sarah spread her husband's documents across a large table. Letters, ledgers, maps showing land acquisitions both legal and otherwise. It was a comprehensive indictment of corporate greed masquerading as progress. "William spent 2 years gathering this," she said softly. "He knew the railroad was corrupt, knew they'd eventually come for our land too. He wanted proof that would stand up in court, proof that couldn't be bought or threatened away." Her voice broke slightly. "It got him killed." "It won't be for nothing," Chen promised. "These documents are exactly what we need. With Webb's testimony and this evidence, we can build a case that reaches all the way to San Francisco." "How long will that take?" Ryder asked. "Months, maybe longer. The legal system moves slowly, especially when powerful interests are involved." "We don't have months. Graves won't wait for legal proceedings." "Then we hold them off until the law can do its job," Boone said firmly. "We've come this far. We don't quit now." That night they posted guards and prepared for the attack they all knew was coming. Ryder found himself on the porch with Webb, both men watching the darkness beyond the ranch's perimeter. "You ever think about what comes after?" Webb asked. "After what?" "After all this? After the fighting's done and the dust settles. What do you do then?" Ryder considered the question. A week ago he would have said he'd move on to the next job, the next town, the next bullet with his name on it. But now the answer wasn't so simple. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in a long time, I don't know." "That's progress, I suppose. Knowing you don't know." "Is it?" "Sure. Means you're asking the question. Means you think there might be something worth living for besides the next fight." Webb shifted his weight. "I'm too old for this, you know. My fighting days should be behind me. But here I am, holding a rifle and waiting for men to come kill me over land and money and pride." "You could still leave. No one would blame you." "Yes, they would. I'd blame me." Webb smiled in the darkness. "Besides, I got nothing else worth doing. Might as well make it count." They fell silent, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. The attack came 2 hours before dawn. They came quietly at first, shadows moving through shadows, trying to reach the house before the alarm could be raised. But Sarah's men were experienced ranch hands who knew their land, and they spotted the infiltrators before they got close. The first shot shattered the pre-dawn stillness, and then the world erupted into chaos. Ryder rolled from his bedroll, gun already in hand, and made for the windows. Outside, muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness like violent fireflies. The railroad men had brought at least 20 guns this time, and they weren't holding back. "East side!" someone shouted. "They're trying to flank!" Ryder moved to that position, saw men running through the darkness toward the barn. He fired, dropped one, fired again, and missed. His wounded leg buckled, sending him to one knee, but he kept shooting. Beside him, Boone appeared with a rifle, methodically picking targets. "How many?" "Too many. They're trying to burn us out again." "Like hell they are." Boone leaned out the window and fired 3 quick shots. "This isn't my land, but I'll be damned if I let them burn someone else's." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The railroad men were better organized this time, moving in coordinated groups, providing covering fire for each advance. They'd learned from their losses at Boone's homestead. Sarah moved through the house, directing defenses with surprising tactical skill. "Northeast corner needs support. Chen, take 2 men and reinforce that position. Someone get water ready in case they light the roof." A bullet smashed through the window above Ryder's head, showering him with glass. He wiped blood from his face and kept firing. His ammunition was running low. They all were. "We can't hold this position much longer," one of Sarah's men called out. "They're going to rush us." But then from the south came the sound of hoofbeats and shouting. New riders arriving at full gallop, their guns already blazing. For a terrifying moment, Ryder thought it was railroad reinforcements. Then he recognized Sheriff Morton's voice above the gunfire. "Stand down! This is the law! Stand down or be shot!" Morton had brought every deputy he could muster, plus a dozen citizens from town who'd decided they were done watching the railroad run roughshod over justice. The railroad men found themselves caught between the ranch defenders and this new force, outnumbered and outflanked. The fight drained out of them quickly after that. Those who could fled into the darkness. Those who couldn't surrendered or died where they stood. When the sun finally rose, it illuminated a scene of devastation. Bodies lay scattered across the ranch yard. The barn smoldered where someone had tried to set it ablaze before being cut down. Wounded men from both sides groaned and called for help. But they'd held. Against impossible odds, they'd held. Morton found Ryder sitting on the porch, reloading his guns with mechanical precision despite the exhaustion that made his hands shake. "You look like hell," Morton observed. "Feel worse. That leg needs proper attention. I've got a doctor coming out from town." "Appreciate it." Morton sat down beside him, groaning as his own body reminded him he wasn't as young as he used to be. "I made a choice tonight. Might cost me my badge, might cost me more, but I couldn't sit in town and pretend I didn't know what was happening out here." "What changed your mind?" "You did, actually. When you asked what I believed in more, the law or justice. Made me realize those should be the same thing, but they're not anymore. So I had to choose." He pulled out his badge, looked at it. "Figure justice is worth more than a piece of tin." Graves was found among the survivors, wounded but alive. Morton's deputies dragged him to the porch, where the leaders had gathered. "You're finished, Graves," Sarah said. "We have evidence of your crimes, witnesses to your actions. You'll hang for what you did to my husband." Graves laughed, the sound wet and pained. "You think this ends with me? The railroad's bigger than one man, bigger than this whole territory. You cut off one head, 3 more grow back. They'll send more men, better men, and they'll keep coming until they get what they want." "Maybe," Boone said, "but every man they send, every crime they commit, every life they destroy, it all gets documented now. It all becomes evidence. Eventually, the weight of their own corruption will crush them." "You're dreaming. Money doesn't lose. It never loses." "Then I guess we'll see who's right," Ryder said. "You from a jail cell, us from wherever we end up." As the deputies led Graves away, Chen approached with news. "I've sent word to San Francisco, to federal prosecutors who've been building cases against railroad corruption for years. With this evidence and these witnesses, we can finally break their stranglehold on this region. How long? Sarah asked. 6 months, maybe a year. These things take time. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we do what you've all been doing. We survive. We hold our ground. We don't let them intimidate us into silence. Chen adjusted his spectacles. The railroad's counting on people being too scared or too tired to fight. As long as we keep fighting, they can't win. The doctor arrived mid-morning and set to work on the wounded. When he got to Ryder, he made disapproving sounds. This leg should have been treated properly days ago. You're lucky you still have it. Doesn't feel lucky. Well, you will feel lucky when you're walking on it in a few weeks instead of having it cut off at the knee. The doctor began cleaning the wound. You've got an infection, but it's not too far gone. Rest, proper care, and you'll heal. I don't have time to rest. You'll make time, or I'll make it for you with laudanum and restraints. Your choice. Ryder chose rest, though not happily. For the next 3 days, he recuperated at Sarah's ranch while the lawyers built their case, and Morton coordinated with federal marshals who were finally taking an interest in the railroad's activities. Boone visited him often, and slowly, carefully, they talked about everything that had happened. About Mara, about trust and betrayal, about the choices that defined men, and the grace that sometimes saved them. I'm going back to the homestead tomorrow, Boone said on the 3rd day. Back to Mara, back to rebuilding. The barn needs replacing, the fields need tending. Life doesn't stop just because we almost died. What about the railroad? They'll come again. Maybe, but I've got federal protection now, at least temporarily. And I've got something more important. I've got proof that standing your ground matters, that fighting back isn't futile. Boone paused. You could come with me. Help rebuild. Start fresh. Ryder looked at his hands, at the calluses from holding guns and the scars from old fights. I wouldn't know how to live that life. Neither did I once, but I learned you could too. What about Mara, after everything that happened? Mara and I have talked, really talked, maybe for the first time in our marriage, about what she needs, what I need, what we need to build together. Boone met Ryder's eyes. She doesn't blame you, Kane. Neither do I. We all made choices. Now we live with them and try to make better ones going forward. That simple? That complicated. But it starts with trying. That night, Ryder stood on the porch watching the stars and thinking about futures he'd never imagined. Behind him, inside the ranch house, people laughed and talked about tomorrow like it was something worth planning for. The sound was foreign to him, almost painful in its normalcy. Webb joined him, moving slower than before. The old man had taken a bullet in the shoulder during the final battle, but he'd survived. You leaving? Webb asked. Thinking about it? Where would you go? Don't know. Somewhere the railroad hasn't reached yet. Somewhere I can disappear. You've been disappearing your whole life, Kane. Maybe it's time to try being found instead. Before Ryder could respond, Morton appeared with news that changed everything. We've got a problem, a big one. They gathered inside Boone, Sarah, Chen, and the others who'd become unlikely allies in this fight. What is it? Sarah asked. 3 of Elias's neighbors sold their land to the railroad today. Good prices, no threats, clean transactions. Morton unfolded a map. Which means the railroad now owns everything surrounding the Boone homestead. They've cut you off, Elias. No access roads, no water rights from the creek that crosses those properties. They've isolated you. I've got a well on my property, Boone said. Your well runs dry in late summer. You know that. You've always relied on creek access for irrigation. Morton pointed to the map. They're not going to attack you anymore. They're going to starve you out. Make it impossible to farm, impossible to survive. Eventually, you'll have to sell or abandon the place. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The railroad had adapted, learned from their failures. If they couldn't take the land by force, they'd take it by siege. There has to be a legal remedy, Chen said. Water rights, easements, all of which take years to litigate. And in the meantime, Elias loses everything he's worked for. Morton shook his head. They're going to win, not with guns, but with lawyers and time and patience. Boone stood, walked to the window. Then I'll adapt too. Dig deeper wells, haul water, plant crops that need less irrigation. I'll make it work. For how long? 1 season? 2? They can wait you out, Elias. That's what they're counting on. Ryder watched Boone's reflection in the window glass, saw the defeat creeping into his eyes despite his defiant words. This was a different kind of violence, subtler, but just as deadly. And there was no fighting it with bullets. What if he doesn't fight alone? Ryder heard himself say. What if we all fight with him? What do you mean? Sarah asked. The railroad wins by isolating people, by making each fight individual and overwhelming. But what if it wasn't individual anymore? What if everyone they're trying to push out formed a collective? Shared resources, shared labor, shared costs? Chen's eyes lit up. A cooperative? You're talking about forming a legal cooperative. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a gunfighter, not a farmer, but I know that strength comes in numbers. He's right, Sarah said slowly. My ranch is too big for me to work alone. I've been thinking about selling, but what if instead I partnered with others? We could create something the railroad can't easily destroy. It would take time to organize, Chen warned, and buy-in from people who've been trained to fight alone. Then we start small, Boone said, turning from the window with renewed energy. We start with those of us in this room. We pool what we have, we work together, and we show others it's possible. The discussion went late into the night, plans forming and reforming as people contributed ideas and concerns. Ryder mostly listened, watching these people transform from isolated victims into something resembling a community. It was strange and uncomfortable and strangely compelling. Near midnight, Boone pulled him aside. You meant what you said about fighting with us? I don't know anything about farming. That's not what I asked. Ryder looked at his hands again, at the weapons that had defined him for so long. I don't know if I can be what you need. I need someone who keeps his word and stands his ground. You've proven you can do that. Boone paused. The question is whether you want to. I've spent my whole life being good at one thing, killing. Now you're asking me to be good at something else, something I've got no experience with. I'm asking you to try, that's all. Just try. The simple request carried more weight than any threat or promise could have. Trying meant staying. Staying meant changing. Changing meant becoming someone new, someone unproven, someone who might fail. It terrified him more than any gunfight ever had. But as he looked around the room at these people who'd taken bullets and risked everything for principles that didn't pay and justice that came too slow, he felt something shift inside himself. Not certainty. He was too damaged for certainty. But possibility. The faint, fragile possibility that maybe he could be more than what violence had made him. I'll try, he said finally. No promises, but I'll try. Boone smiled, and it was the same smile he'd given Ryder that first day on the homestead, when he'd offered coffee and trust to a stranger with a gun. That's all anyone can ask. The journey back to the Boone homestead took 2 days, and every mile felt like walking into a different life. Ryder rode beside Boone and Webb, their horses loaded with supplies from Sarah's ranch and the optimism of people who'd decided hope was worth the risk. Behind them, 3 more families followed, neighbors who'd listened to the cooperative plan and decided isolation was more dangerous than cooperation. Mara was waiting on the porch when they arrived, and the reunion between her and Boone was something Ryder couldn't watch directly. He busied himself with the horses, giving them their privacy, trying not to think about the weight of what had happened between the 3 of them and what it would mean going forward. When Mara finally approached him, her expression was guarded but not hostile. You came back, she said. Wasn't planning to. What changed? Ryder thought about the question, about all the moments that had led him to this one. I got tired of running, thought I'd try standing still for a while, see what happens. And if standing still gets you killed, then at least I'll die as something other than a hired gun. Mara studied his face, searching for something she either found or decided to believe in. Elias told me about the cooperative, about the plan to fight back by working together. It's a good plan, better than anything I could come up with. He also told me you're staying to help. She paused. That true? For now, we'll see how long I last at honest work. Honest work is harder than the other kind. Takes more from you. She looked toward Boone, who was directing the other families where to set up their temporary camps. But it gives back more too, if you let it. Over the next weeks, the homestead transformed. What had been one family's isolated struggle became a shared enterprise. They rebuilt the barn together, raised it in 3 days with all hands working in coordinated effort. They dug new irrigation channels, pooling labor and knowledge to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable alone. Sarah arrived with 2 of her best hands and equipment to share. Webb, despite his age and wounded shoulder, worked alongside younger men and refused to complain. Ryder found himself learning skills he'd never imagined needing: how to judge wood for building, how to read soil for planting, how to work a team of horses pulling a plow. His hands, so accustomed to guns, blistered from tool handles and honest labor. His body, trained for violence, ached from the different demands of construction and cultivation. It was harder than he'd expected, but Mara had been right. It gave back more too. One evening, as the sun painted the rebuilt barn in shades of amber, Boone found him sitting alone, working oil into a new bridle. "You've got a knack for leather work," Boone observed. "Hands remember what they learn, just giving them something different to remember." Boone sat down beside him. "I wanted to thank you for staying, for helping. I know this isn't what you're used to." "Neither is being thanked." Ryder set the bridle aside. "You don't owe me gratitude, Elias. I owe you, for showing me there might be something worth more than the next job. You saved my life, saved Mara's life, helped save everyone's lives. I'd say we're even." "We're not. We won't ever be." Ryder met his eyes. "What happened with Mara is between Mara and me," Boone interrupted gently. "We've talked about it, really talked, and we've decided that carrying it around like a weight helps nobody, so we're letting it go. Not forgetting it, but not letting it poison what we're building either." "How do you do that? Just decide to forgive?" "It's not just deciding. It's choosing, every day, to move forward instead of backward. Some days are easier than others." Boone picked up the bridle, examined Ryder's work. "Good stitching. You're learning fast. Had a good teacher. We've all got something to teach each other. That's what makes this work." But even as the cooperative took shape and grew stronger, the shadow of the railroad loomed. They came not with guns now, but with lawyers and paperwork, filing injunctions and property disputes, tying up water rights in legal knots that would take years to untangle. They bought out the general store in the nearest town, making it harder for the cooperative members to get supplies. They spread rumors that the homesteaders were radicals and troublemakers, turning public opinion against them. It was a different kind of siege, but no less effective. Chen traveled back and forth between the homestead and San Francisco, building the federal case piece by piece. But legal justice moved with glacial slowness, and the railroad's resources seemed infinite. "We need to hold out until the trial," Chen explained during one of his visits. "I've got prosecutors interested, but they need time to build an airtight case. 6 months? Maybe 8? "We can hold out that long," Boone said, though his voice carried less certainty than his words. "Can you? The railroad strategy is working. They're choking off your access to markets, to credit, to everything you need to survive. How long before people start giving up and selling?" "As long as it takes." But that night, Ryder overheard 2 of the families talking about leaving. The pressure was too much, the future too uncertain. They had children to feed, debts coming due. The cooperative was a beautiful idea, but ideas didn't pay bills or fill stomachs. By morning, one family had packed up and left. A week later, another followed. The cooperative that had seemed so promising began to fray at the edges. Ryder found Boone in the barn one evening, sitting alone in the half-darkness. "They're going to win," Boone said without preamble. "Not with bullets, but with time and money and the weight of the whole system pressing down on us. We can't outlast that." "Maybe not, but we can make them pay for every inch." "That's not enough. I wanted to prove that standing your ground matters, that fighting back makes a difference. But all I'm doing is watching good people suffer because they believed in me." Ryder sat down beside him. "They believed in themselves. You just gave them permission to try. And now they're losing everything trying. Some of them are. Others are still here, still fighting." Ryder gestured toward the homestead where lights burned in windows, where families gathered for shared meals and shared purpose. "That counts for something." "Does it? If we lose anyway?" Maybe losing isn't the only measure of whether something matters. Boone looked at him. When did you become a philosopher? When I stopped being just a killer. The moment hung between them, heavy with exhaustion and fading hope. Then Webb appeared in the barn doorway, moving faster than his old bones should allow. Riders coming, a lot of them. They grabbed rifles and took positions, expecting another railroad assault. But as the riders drew closer, Ryder saw something unexpected. Sheriff Morton's badge glinting in the lamplight, and behind him, a federal marshal's star. Morton dismounted, his face grave. We need to talk. All of you. They gathered in the house, Boone, Mara, Ryder, Sarah, Chen, Webb, and the remaining cooperative members. The federal marshal, a hard-faced man named Garrett, stood at the head of the table. I'm here with warrants, Garrett announced. Arrest warrants for railroad executives, agents, and hired guns implicated in conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, extortion, and corruption. 23 individuals total, including everyone involved in the attacks on this homestead and others. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. How? Chen asked. I thought we needed more time to build the case. You did, but someone else provided evidence we weren't expecting. Garrett pulled out a ledger, placed it on the table. Financial records from inside the railroad's operations, payment vouchers for hired killers, bribe receipts for local officials, documentation of every illegal land seizure in this territory for the past 3 years. Where did you get this? Sarah breathed. From a railroad accountant who grew a conscience, a man named Thomas Brennan. He walked into the federal prosecutor's office 2 weeks ago and handed over everything, said he couldn't live with what he'd been part of anymore. Ryder felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest, something that might have been hope if he'd known how to recognize it. What does this mean? Boone asked. It means the railroad's operation here is finished. The executives responsible are going to prison. The land seizures will be investigated and likely reversed, and anyone who cooperated with their criminal activities will face prosecution. Garrett looked directly at Boone. Including attempts on your life and property, Mr. Boone, justice is finally catching up. But Mara's eyes had gone to Ryder. What about people who worked for the railroad before? People who took jobs but didn't go through with them? Garrett followed her gaze. You're Kane, the gunfighter. Ryder stood slowly. That's right. You were hired to kill Elias Boone. I was. But you didn't. No. Garrett was quiet for a moment. I've read reports of what happened here, how you fought alongside Boone against the railroad's men, how you helped expose their operations. He pulled a paper from his coat. I also have this. A signed statement from Elias Boone requesting clemency for you, citing your actions in defense of his life and property. I don't want clemency, Ryder said. I took the job. I accepted blood money. Whatever consequences come from that, I'll face them. Noble, stupid, but noble sec. Garrett refolded the paper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to testify about who hired you and what they hired you to do. You're going to provide every detail about the railroad's recruitment and payment of hired guns. And in exchange for that testimony, the federal prosecutor is prepared to offer immunity. I don't deserve immunity. Maybe not. But the law isn't always about deserving. Sometimes it's about usefulness. Your testimony helps convict powerful criminals. That's worth something. Garrett's expression softened slightly. Besides, from what I hear, you've already paid a price. Changed sides, took bullets, nearly died defending people you were supposed to kill. That counts as penance in my book. The room was silent. Ryder felt everyone's eyes on him, waiting for his decision. What happens after? After the testimony? That's up to you. You're a free man, Kane. Make of that what you will. Later that night, after the marshal and his men had departed with their warrants, after the cooperative members had celebrated the news of their vindication, Ryder stood alone on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. Boone found him there, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. Thought you might need this, Boone said, offering one. Thanks. They drank in comfortable silence. You gonna take the immunity deal? Boone asked eventually. Don't have much choice. They need my testimony. That's not what I asked. Ryder turned the glass in his hands. I spent my whole life running from consequences. Seems wrong to run from them now when they're offering me a way out. Consequences and justice aren't the same thing, Sometimes accepting grace is harder than accepting punishment. Is it grace if I don't deserve it? Grace by definition is something you don't deserve. That's what makes it grace. Boone finished his whiskey. Question is, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't have the next job lined up, the next town to drift to. It's unsettling. Freedom usually is at first. Over the following months, the legal machinery ground forward. Ryder testified in San Francisco, spending 3 days in a federal courthouse detailing the railroad's criminal operations. Facing the executives who'd hired him, seeing them in chains instead of behind desks, created a strange sense of closure. Graves was tried separately for the murder of William Travers. Webb's testimony, combined with the documentary evidence, secured a conviction. The sentence was death by hanging. The night before the execution, Ryder visited the jail. Graves looked smaller than he had in the field, diminished by captivity and approaching mortality. When he saw Ryder, he laughed bitterly. Come to gloat? No, came to understand. Understand what? How we got here. Two men on opposite sides of the same game, both of us thinking we were just doing a job. Graves studied him. You think we're the same? I think we could have been. Different choices, different moments, and maybe I'm the one in that cell. But you're not. You chose differently. That makes all the difference. Graves leaned against the bars. You know what I regret most? Not the killing, not the crimes. I regret that it didn't mean anything. I destroyed lives for money that's already spent, for a company that forgot my name the moment I was arrested. It was all for nothing. It doesn't have to be nothing. You can still make it mean something. How? Tell the truth. Not for clemency, not for anything but the truth. Give the people you hurt that much, at least. Graves was quiet for a long time. Would it matter? Would it change anything? I don't know, but it might change you, and maybe that's enough. When Graves hanged 2 days later, he died having given a full confession that implicated even more railroad officials. It wasn't redemption. Some things couldn't be redeemed, but it was something. A final choice that mattered. Ryder returned to the homestead to find it transformed yet again. With the legal threats lifted and the railroad's leadership in disarray, more families had joined the cooperative. The barn had been expanded. New houses dotted the landscape. Fields that had lain fallow now showed the green promise of crops. And Mara was pregnant. Boone told him the news with quiet pride. Due in the spring. We're building something real now, Kane. Something that'll outlast us. I'm happy for you, for both of you. Mara wanted me to tell you something. Boone hesitated. She wanted you to know that the baby, it's mine. There's no question about it. But she also wanted you to know that she's grateful for everything, for fighting for us, for giving us the chance to fix what was broken between us. Ryder felt relief in something else, a door closing on a chapter of his life that had been equal parts mistake and miracle. Tell her I'm grateful too, for showing me that people can change if they choose to. As autumn deepened into winter, Ryder found himself settling into the rhythm of cooperative life. He wasn't a farmer and never would be, but he discovered he had a talent for working with horses and for the kind of problem-solving that came from years of tactical thinking. When neighboring ranches had trouble with rustlers, he helped organize defenses. When disputes arose over water rights and boundaries, his experience navigating the gray areas of frontier justice proved valuable. He was becoming something new, not quite respectable, not quite reformed, but no longer defined solely by the violence he'd once traded in. One cold December morning, Sarah arrived at the homestead with news and a proposal. The railroad's selling off their holdings in the territory, she announced. Everything they seized illegally, everything they bought under duress, it's all going to auction. Can we afford any of it? Boone asked. Separately? No, but together as a cooperative, we might be able to purchase some key parcels, especially the land that borders the creek. If we control the water source, we control our own future. They pooled their resources and, with Chen's legal expertise, managed to purchase 3 critical sections of land at the auction. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to secure their water rights, enough to create a buffer against future threats, enough to prove that collective action could triumph over corporate power. The celebration that night was the first truly joyful gathering Ryder had attended in longer than he could remember. Music played, Children ran wild, and adults danced in the barn that they'd built together from ashes and determination. Mara found him watching from the edges, as was his habit. "You should dance," she said. "I don't know how." "Neither do most of the people out there. They're doing it anyway." She extended her hand. "Come on, just one dance. Consider it payment for saving my life." "That's not how payment works." "Then consider it a gift." He let her pull him into the dance, stumbling through steps he didn't know, while she laughed at his awkwardness. Boone watched from across the barn, and when their eyes met, he raised his glass in a salute that held no jealousy, only acknowledgement. When the dance ended, Ryder excused himself and stepped outside. The night was clear and cold, stars sharp enough to cut. He walked to the edge of the property, to the place where he'd first observed the homestead through a rifle scope, ready to kill the man who lived there. So much had changed since that moment. Everything had changed. Webb found him there, wrapped in a heavy coat against the winter wind. "Getting too cold for these old bones," Webb said, "but I saw you sneak out. Figured you might need company." "Just thinking." "About what?" "About staying or going." Webb nodded slowly. "Been wondering when you'd face that question. What's the answer?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to stay. But another part thinks I don't belong here, that I'm pretending to be something I'm not." "What do you think you are?" "A killer. That's what I've always been. That's what I'm good at." "You're also a builder now, a defender, a teacher to some of the younger folk who've asked you about horses and marksmanship. You're a friend, though I doubt you've noticed that yet." Webb smiled. "See, they think me, The thing about people is they're not just one thing. They're all the things they've ever been and all the things they're trying to become. You can't erase the killer you were, but you don't have to let that be all you are. What if I fail? What if I try to be better and just end up making things worse? Then you fail. And you try again. That's what living is, Kane. It's failing and failing again until eventually you get something right. Webb clapped him on the shoulder. "The question isn't whether you'll fail. It's whether you care enough to keep trying after you do." They stood together in the cold, two men who'd survived things they shouldn't have, watching the light and warmth spill from the barn where people they'd fought beside celebrated a future they'd helped create. The next morning, Ryder woke to find Boone already working, despite the early hour and the frost that painted everything white. "Couldn't sleep," Boone explained. "Too much on my mind." "About what?" "About spring. About the baby coming. About whether we can really make this cooperative thing work long term." He paused in his work. "About whether you're planning to stay or go." "What makes you think I'm leaving?" "Because I know that look. I've worn it myself. It's the look of a man trying to decide if he deserves to stay somewhere he's starting to feel at home." Ryder didn't deny it. "I want you to know something," Boone continued. "Whatever you decide, there's no judgment from me. You've done more than anyone could have asked. If you need to move on, that's your right. But I'm hoping you'll stay. Not because we need you, though we do, but because I think you need us. Need a place to belong. Need people who know what you've done and care about you anyway." Boone met his eyes. "That's rare, Kane. A place where your past doesn't define your future. Don't walk away from it lightly." Before Ryder could respond, riders appeared on the horizon. Not a threat this time, but travelers. As they drew closer, he recognized the leader. Sheriff Morton, no longer wearing his badge. "Lost your job?" Boone called out as Morton dismounted. "Resigned it, actually. Turned out the town council didn't appreciate my testimony against railroad corruption. Suggested I find employment elsewhere." Morton smiled without bitterness. "So I'm taking that suggestion. Heard you might need someone with law experience to help manage this cooperative of yours." "We might," Boone said carefully, "but it's hard work for little pay. Not much glory in it. Had glory. Found it disappointing." Morton looked around the homestead, at the rebuilt structures and cultivated fields. This looks like something real, something worth working for." The cooperative absorbed Morton, and then others who came seeking refuge from the railroad's collapsed empire. By spring, when Mara gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Hope, the settlement had grown into something approaching a small town. Ryder delivered a foal from one of the mares on the same day Hope was born, and the symmetry of it, new life entering the world, while he coaxed another new life into existence, felt significant in ways he couldn't articulate. He held the hours-old foal steady while its mother cleaned it, and thought about beginnings and endings and the strange territory between them where life actually happened. That evening, Boone invited him to see the baby. "She's beautiful," Ryder said, looking at the tiny face wrapped in blankets Mara had sewn. "She's perfect," Boone corrected, "and terrifying. I'm responsible for this whole person now, for teaching her and protecting her and making sure she grows up in a world that's better than the one we inherited. You'll do fine." "We'll see." Boone looked at him. "I want to ask you something, and you can say no without any hard feelings." "What?" "I want you to be her godfather. Not in any religious sense, but someone who'll watch over her if anything happens to Mara and me. Someone who'll help her understand that people can change, that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that choosing to be better matters." He paused. "Someone who'll teach her that the world is complicated, but worth fighting for anyway." The request landed like a physical weight. Ryder looked at the baby, at this innocent life that had nothing to do with guns or violence or the dark roads he'd walked. "I'm not qualified for that." You're exactly qualified for that. Because you've lived it. You've been the villain and the hero and everything in between. You've failed and gotten back up. That's what I want her to learn." Ryder thought about all the versions of himself he'd been. The killer, the drifter, the man who'd almost murdered this child's father, and then he thought about the version he was becoming. Uncertain, unfinished, but trying. "Yeah," he said finally. "Yeah, I'll do it." That night, lying in the small room he'd built onto the barn, Ryder thought about Sarah's offer from earlier that week. She needed help managing her ranch, needed someone with his particular skills to help defend against the remnants of the railroad's criminal network who were still operating in the territory. It was honest work, good work. And it came with fair pay and respect. But it also meant leaving the homestead, leaving the cooperative, leaving the closest thing to family he'd known in decades. The decision should have been easy. Take the job, make something of himself, prove he could stand alone. But lying there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the settlement around him, a baby crying, someone playing a harmonica, voices raised in conversation and laughter, he realized he didn't want to stand alone anymore. He'd spent his whole life proving he could survive on his own. Maybe it was time to prove he could survive with others. When dawn came, he found Boone feeding the animals. "I'm staying," Ryder said without preamble, "if the offer's still open." Boone didn't look up from his work, but his hands stilled. "It's open. But you should know what you're choosing. It's not exciting. Mostly it's routine and hard work and dealing with people's problems. It's about as far from the gunfighter life as you can get." "Good. You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Boone smiled. "Then welcome home, Kane." The word, home, settled over Ryder like snow, quiet and transforming. He tested it in his mind, tried it on for size, and found that despite everything, despite all the blood and mistakes and wrong turns, it fit. Over the next year, the cooperative continued to grow and stabilize. Chen helped them incorporate officially, giving them legal protections against future attempts to seize their land. Morton organized a community watch that kept rustlers and troublemakers at bay without resorting to the brutal frontier justice that had dominated before. Sarah merged her ranch's operations with the cooperative, creating a larger, more resilient organization. And Ryder found his place in it all, not as a killer or even as someone trying to atone, but simply as a member of a community that needed what he could offer and offered what he needed in return. He taught young men and women how to handle guns safely, how to defend themselves without becoming what he'd been. He broke horses with patience he'd never known he possessed. He sat on the cooperative's council and helped make decisions about their collective future. He became, improbably, a citizen. One evening in late summer, he sat on the porch with Webb, both of them watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "You ever regret it?" Webb asked. "Choosing to stay?" "Every day," Ryder admitted. "And then every day I don't leave, which makes it less of a regret and more of a choice. That's the thing about choosing, isn't it? You have to keep doing it, over and over. One choice doesn't fix everything." "No," but maybe enough choices in the same direction eventually add up to something. Webb nodded sagely. You've changed, Kane. When you first showed up here, you had the eyes of a man who'd already died and was just waiting for his body to catch up. Now you look alive. Scared sometimes, uncertain often, but alive. I am scared. This whole thing terrifies me. The idea that I might mess it up, might hurt people without meaning to, might fall back into old patterns. Good. Fear means you care. And caring is what makes us human instead of just animals surviving. As autumn approached again, bringing with it the anniversary of Ryder's arrival at the homestead, the cooperative organized a harvest celebration. It was a tradition they'd invented, marking not just the gathering of crops, but the gathering of people who'd chosen to build something together. Boone stood to make a speech, Little Hope balanced on his hip, already walking and getting into everything. A year ago, Boone began, most of us thought we'd have to face the railroad alone. Thought our only choice was to sell out or die trying to hold on. But then we learned something important. We learned that alone is a choice, not a condition. That standing together isn't weakness, it's strategy, and it works. Cheers erupted from the gathered crowd. We've got challenges ahead, Boone continued. The railroad's gone, but there'll be other threats. Drought, disease, disputes among ourselves. Life on the frontier doesn't get easier just because we've got each other. But it gets more possible. And possible is enough. He looked directly at Ryder. I want to single out someone who taught me that people can change if they want to badly enough. Someone who came here to destroy what we'd built and ended up helping us build something even better. Someone who reminds us every day that your past doesn't have to be your future. Ryder felt every eye turn toward him, felt the weight of acknowledgement and acceptance. It should have made him uncomfortable. Somehow, it didn't. That night, after the celebration wound down and people retired to their homes, Mara found Ryder alone with the horses. You did good, she said. This year, you did really good. I'm still figuring it out. We all are. That's the point. She leaned against the fence. I wanted to tell you something. About that night, about what happened between us. I used to think it was a mistake, something to regret and hide from, but I don't anymore. No? No. Because it wasn't about you or even really about me. It was about two people trying to feel something real in the middle of everything falling apart. And yes, it hurt Elias. And yes, we had to work through that. But it also forced us to really talk, to be honest about what we needed from each other. In a strange way, it saved our marriage by nearly destroying it. I'm not sure that's how most people would see it. Most people haven't lived what we've lived. Most people get to be certain about right and wrong. We don't have that luxury. She touched his hand briefly. I'm saying thank you for being human enough to make mistakes and decent enough to try to make them right. After she left, Ryder stood alone with the horses and thought about forgiveness, both receiving it and giving it. He thought about Boone's capacity to let go of anger, about Mara's ability to find meaning in betrayal, about his own slow, stumbling journey toward becoming someone worth forgiving. Winter came again, harsh and testing. The cooperative weathered it together, sharing resources and warmth and the accumulated knowledge of people who'd learned to survive by depending on each other. And when spring arrived with Hope's first birthday and the renewal of life across the land they'd fought for, Ryder realized he'd stopped counting the days since his last kill. Stopped measuring his worth by the notches he hadn't added to his gun. Stopped waiting for the moment when his past would catch up and destroy his present. He was simply living, working, laughing sometimes, struggling often, but present in his own life in a way he'd never been before. One morning, he woke to find his saddlebag, the one he'd carried when he first arrived, sitting on his workbench. Inside was the money the railroad had paid him, the blood money he'd never spent and never returned, and a note in Boone's handwriting. This belongs to you. What you do with it defines who you choose to be. Ryder sat with the money for a long time, feeling the weight of it, the history of it. Then he walked to the cooperative's main office and handed it to Morton, who was managing their finances. What's this? Morton asked. Payment. For a full share in the cooperative. I want to buy in officially, not just work here. Morton looked at the money, then at Ryder. You sure? This is a lot of capital. You could start your own place, be independent. I've been independent. It's overrated. Ryder smiled. I want to belong to something. This seems like a good something to belong to. The transaction was recorded, making Ryder an official member of the cooperative with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Blood money transformed into seed money, violence redeemed through cultivation. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even balance. But it was something, a gesture toward the idea that people could change, not just who they were, but what they'd done, transforming poison into possibility through the alchemy of choice and time. That evening, Ryder stood in the field where he'd once hidden, rifle trained on Elias Boone's unsuspecting back. The land looked different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. Where he'd once seen a target, he now saw a friend. Where he'd calculated killing angles, he now mentally mapped irrigation channels and planting schedules. You coming to dinner? Boone called from the house. Mara made stew. Yeah, Ryder called back. Be right there. He took one last look at the horizon where he'd once planned to disappear after completing his job. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now, someone he'd been in another life, another world, another story entirely. This was his story now. Not the tale of Ryder Kane, the gunfighter, the killer, the man who sold his soul one bullet at a time, but the story of Ryder Kane, the horseman, the cooperative member, the godfather to a little girl who'd never know him as anything but Uncle Ryder, who taught her to ride and told her stories about the importance of choosing who you wanted to be. As he walked toward the house, toward the light and warmth and the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of belonging somewhere, he felt something he'd never felt before. He felt like he'd finally come home. The door opened to the sound of laughter and conversation, to the smell of food and the warmth of people who knew his worst moments and chose him anyway. Hope toddled toward him on unsteady legs, arms outstretched in greeting, and he picked her up, feeling her tiny hands grip his collar with complete trust. Hungry? Mara asked, ladling stew into bowls. Starving, Ryder replied, and realized he wasn't just talking about food. They gathered around the table. Boone, Mara, Hope, Webb, and a few others who'd become family, not through blood but through shared struggle and choice. They ate together, talked about the day's work and tomorrow's plans, made jokes and settled small disputes with the ease of people who'd learned to navigate each other's rough edges. It was ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of evening that wouldn't make any stories or fill any songs. It was perfect. Later, after the dishes were washed and Hope was asleep and the others had drifted off to their own spaces, Ryder stood alone on the porch one more time. Not because he was leaving or running or hiding, simply because he liked the view. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama and human redemption alike. The wind carried the scent of growing things and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the sound was lonely but not threatening. Ryder thought about all the versions of himself he'd been. The boy who'd first picked up a gun, the young man who'd discovered he was good at killing, the drifter who'd taken jobs without asking questions, the hired gun who'd ridden into this valley, ready to commit murder for money. And he thought about who he was now, still figuring it out, still uncertain, still carrying scars that would never fully heal. But trying. Every day, trying to be better than he'd been, to build more than he destroyed, to give more than he took. It wasn't redemption. He didn't believe in redemption anymore, didn't think his sins could be washed clean by good deeds or honest work. The men he'd killed stayed dead. The damage he'd done stayed done. But maybe redemption wasn't the point. Maybe the point was simply choosing every day to walk toward light instead of darkness, to build instead of destroy, to stay instead of run. The door opened behind him, and Boone stepped out. Can't sleep? He asked. Just thinking. About? About how I came here to kill you, and ended up finding a life worth living instead. Boone leaned against the railing beside him. Funny how things work out sometimes. Is it? Or is it just what happens when people choose something better than the easy path? Maybe both. They stood in comfortable silence, two men who'd traveled very different roads to reach this same porch, this same moment of peace, hard won and carefully maintained. You know what I've learned, Boone said eventually. The frontier isn't about land or opportunity or any of that myth people sell. It's about choice. Out here, you get to decide who you are because nobody knows who you were. You can reinvent yourself completely if you want to. Or you can become who you always were underneath everything else, Ryder added. That too. The wind picked up, carrying voices from the settlement. Someone singing, someone laughing, the ordinary sounds of people living ordinary lives in the extraordinary act of choosing community over isolation. Thank you, Ryder said quietly, for not killing me when you had the chance, for giving me a reason not to kill you, for showing me there was another way. You did the same for me. Showed me that holding on to anger just makes you smaller, that forgiveness isn't weakness, that people are more complicated than the worst thing they've ever done. They shook hands, and the gesture felt like an ending and a beginning at once, the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. When Boone went back inside, Ryder stayed a moment longer, breathing in the night air and feeling the solid earth beneath his feet. Tomorrow he'd wake early and work with the horses. The day after, he'd help repair fencing damaged by winter storms. Next week, there'd be a cooperative meeting to plan the spring planting. It was the kind of future he'd never imagined for himself. Mundane, predictable, rooted in place and community and routine. The kind of future that wouldn't make any stories worth telling. But as he finally turned and walked inside, closing the door on the night and the cold and the ghosts of who he used to be, Ryder realized something fundamental. He didn't need his life to be a story anymore. He just needed it to be a life. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, it was. The house settled around him, creaking wood and sleeping people, and the gentle warmth of a fire banked for the night. In her room, Hope made a soft sound in her sleep. Down the hall, he could hear Mara and Boone's quiet conversation, the intimate murmur of two people rebuilding trust one honest word at a time. Ryder lay down on the bed in the small room that was his, in the house that was theirs, in the settlement they'd all built together from nothing but determination and desperate hope. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in his adult life, slept without his gun within easy reach. And he slept well.